The Imperium's void-faring vessels disappear with disturbing regularity. Some fall victim to Xeno's predation or mechanical failure, while others simply vanish without explanation into the Imperium. These lost ships don't always remain lost. Across the galaxy, massive conglomerations of fused spacecraft drift through the void. These so-called space hulks are among the most dangerous phenomena encountered by Imperial forces. Titanic amalgamations represent centuries or millennia of accumulated wreckage, their origins as varied as the threats they pose. Space hulks form through multiple catastrophic processes, though warp translation failures account for the majority. When a vessel's Geller field collapses during transit through the Imperium, the ship becomes exposed to the raw stuff of chaos. The crew dies screaming as reality inverts around them, and the vessel itself becomes fundamentally altered. Time loses meaning in the warp, and a ship that entered the Imperium in the 41st millennium might emerge fused with vessels from the Great Crusade or even the Dark Age of technology. The warp doesn't simply destroy these ships, it collects them, pressing them together like debris caught in a whirlpool until they exit real space as a single twisted mass. Physical collisions in real space contribute to space hulk formation, particularly in regions of dense stellar traffic or ancient battlefields. The Gothic sector witnessed the creation of numerous space hulks during Abaddon the Despoiler's 12th Black Crusade, when hundreds of ships tore each other apart in close-quarters void combat. Crippled vessels drifted together, their gravity wells pulling in additional wreckage. Over decades, these collections grew as passing debris added to their mass. Automated systems sometimes continue functioning on these derelicts, their machine spirits unaware that the ships they serve have become tombs. The accretion process operates on timescales that dwarf human lifespans. A space hulk might begin as 2 or 3 derelict vessels that collide in the void. Centuries pass, and the hulk's gravity attracts additional debris, escape pods, cargo containers, destroyed fighters, and eventually entire ships. Each addition increases the mass, which in turn increases the gravitational pull. Ancient space hulks discovered in the eastern fringe have been dated to the 35th millennium or earlier, their cores containing vessel designs no longer found in Imperial records. The tech priests of Mars consider these ancient hulks sacred artifacts, as they sometimes contain standard template construct fragments or archaeotech worth more than entire systems. The composition of space hulks reflects the diversity of void-faring civilizations. Imperial Navy vessels form the bulk of most hulks encountered in Imperial space, battle cruisers, frigates, and destroyers that failed to return from patrol. Their Gothic architecture remains recognizable even when crushed against Xeno's craft of utterly alien design. Orc rocks and cruisers appear frequently, their crude construction often more intact than Imperial vessels due to their overbuilt nature. Eldar craft ships occasionally appear in space hulks, though their presence raises questions about how vessels protected by sophisticated holofields and psychic wards could become trapped in such formations. Civilian transports make up a significant percentage of space hulk composition. Merchant vessels, pilgrim ships, and colony transports disappear with grim regularity, their crews and passengers adding to the uncounted billions who have died in the void. These civilian craft lack the armor and structural reinforcement of military vessels, so they typically appear as crushed shells within the larger mass. Their cargo holds sometimes remain intact, creating pockets of preserved goods surrounded by twisted metal. Salvage teams have recovered everything from agricultural equipment to priceless artwork from these sections, though the risk rarely justifies the reward. Pre-heresy warships represent the most valuable and dangerous components of space hulks. Vessels that served during the Great Crusade possessed technologies the Imperium can no longer replicate. Their weapon systems operated at efficiency levels modern Forge worlds cannot match, and their armor incorporated materials whose composition remains a mystery. The space hulk designated Spawn of Damnation contained sections of a Dark Angel Strike cruiser that vanished during the Horus Heresy. When Terminators from the First Company boarded the Hulk, they discovered gene seed repositories and weapons that had been lost for 10,000 years. The recovery operation cost 43 Terminator lives, but the chapter considered the price acceptable. Xeno's craft introduced unpredictable elements into space hulk composition. Tyranid bioships decompose differently than conventional vessels, their organic matter sometimes continuing to grow and mutate even after death. Necron tomb ships have been discovered within space hulks, their living metal slowly consuming surrounding vessels as the ancient mechanisms attempt to repair themselves. Tau vessels appear less frequently, as their relatively recent expansion into the galaxy means fewer of their ships have been lost to the warp. When Tau craft do appear in space hulks, their advanced technology makes them priority targets for Mechanicus salvage operations. The phenomenon of warp space fusion creates the most incomprehensible space hulks. Ships from different millennia occupy the same physical space, their structures interpenetrating in ways that violate real space physics. A corridor might begin in an Imperial Navy frigate from the 41st millennium and end in a merchant vessel from the 36th millennium, with no transition point between them. Gravity operates inconsistently in these areas, sometimes pulling in multiple directions simultaneously. Tech priests theorize that these sections exist partially in real space and partially in the warp, though no satisfactory explanation exists for how crew members can traverse them without Geller field protection. Temporal anomalies plague warp-fused hulks. Exploration teams have encountered crew members who died centuries ago, their corpses preserved in temporal stasis or repeating their final moments in endless loops. The space hulk Ulthros contained an entire deck where time flowed backward, spent bolt rounds reassembled themselves, and spilled blood flowed back into corpses. The Deathwatch kill team that investigated this section reported that their own movements felt reversed, as though they were watching recordings of themselves played in reverse. 3 members of the team never emerged, and their fate remains unknown. The Imperium categorizes space hulks based on their behavior patterns. Stable space hulks maintain predictable orbits around stellar bodies or drift through interstellar space on consistent trajectories. These hulks allow for planned boarding operations, as their locations can be tracked and approached with relative safety. The space hulk Sin of Damnation follows a stable orbit through the Ultima Segmentum, reappearing in real space every few centuries. The Blood Angels have boarded this particular hulk multiple times, each expedition recovering valuable gene seed and equipment while purging the Genestealer infestation that inevitably reestablishes itself between appearances. Drifter space hulks phase in and out of real space unpredictably, their appearances following no discernible pattern. These hulks might materialize in a system for days or mere hours before vanishing back into the warp. Their unpredictability makes them extremely dangerous, as they can appear without warning in shipping lanes or planetary orbits. The Hulk-designated Emperor's Mercy emerged from the warp directly above the Hive world Gravelax, its trajectory placing it on collision course with the planet. Only desperate action by the Imperial Navy prevented catastrophe, though 3 destroyers were lost in the effort to alter the Hulk's course. Drifters sometimes appear to possess a form of malign intelligence, though whether this represents actual consciousness or simply the chaotic influence of the warp remains debated. The space hulk Ulthros has appeared in 17 different systems over 4 centuries, and each appearance coincides with significant Imperial military operations in the region. Inquisitorial analysis suggests the Hulk's movements might be guided by chaos entities using it as a transport for demonic incursions or Genestealer infiltrations. Other drifters appear to be attracted to psychic phenomena, materializing near astropathic choirs or during large-scale psyker activities. The transition between warp and real space subjects space hulks to tremendous structural stress. Vessels designed to endure the rigors of warp travel possess Geller fields and reinforced hulls, but space hulks have neither. Each transition tears at the fused structures, creating new breaches and crushing interior spaces. Debris fields surround most space hulks, composed of fragments sheared off during translation. These debris clouds pose navigational hazards and can damage boarding craft, forcing approach vectors that expose assault teams to defensive fire from automated systems or hostile inhabitants. The Imperium leaves permanent scars on vessels exposed to its touch. Space hulks, having spent centuries or millennia drifting through the warp without Geller field protection, bear these scars in ways that defy rational comprehension. The interior spaces of these amalgamated derelicts no longer obey the physical laws that govern real space. Corridors extend far beyond the external dimensions of the ships that contain them. Chambers exist in impossible configurations, with walls that meet at angles human perception struggles to process. Tech priests who attempt to map space Hulk interiors find their surveyors producing contradictory data. The same section measured multiple times yields different dimensions each time. Reality itself becomes negotiable within warp-touch sections of space hulks. Bulkheads phase between solid and incorporeal states without warning. Gravity wells form spontaneously in the middle of corridors, pulling objects and personnel toward invisible points in space. The air tastes of copper and ozone, and shadows move independently of any light source. Boarding teams report walls that bleed without possessing circulatory systems, floors that pulse with rhythms resembling heartbeats, and ceilings that display vistas of alien skies no human has ever witnessed. These manifestations aren't illusions. Pict captures and Auspex readings confirm their physical presence, though the mechanisms behind them remain beyond Imperial understanding. Non-Euclidean geometry pervades the deepest sections of ancient space hulks. Chambers connect in ways that create impossible loops. A team might walk through 5 doors and return to their starting point despite never reversing direction. Stairways lead both up and down simultaneously, depositing those who traverse them in locations that bear no spatial relationship to their origin point. The Death Watch encountered this phenomenon extensively aboard the space hulk designated Morty's Thule, where entire decks existed in configurations that violated 3-dimensional space. Marines would enter a corridor visible through a doorway, only to find themselves emerging from a completely different section of the hulk. Attempts to backtrack failed consistently, as the paths refused to connect in reverse. The Adeptus Mechanicus has documented cases where space hulk interiors contain more volume than their external dimensions permit. The Hulk Twilight of Humanity measured approximately 12 kilometers in length based on external surveys, yet exploration teams mapped over 40 kilometers of interior corridors before abandoning the effort. This spatial expansion appears to intensify the deeper teams penetrate into the Hulk's core. Outer sections generally maintain predictable layouts matching standard Imperial vessel designs, but inner sections increasingly violate spatial logic. Tech priests theorize that prolonged warp exposure allows the immaterium to bleed into physical structures, expanding them through dimensions human senses cannot perceive. Temporal distortions represent the most disorienting aspect of space hulk exploration. Time flows inconsistently throughout these vessels, creating zones where seconds stretch into hours or days compress into moments. Chronometers malfunction in these areas, their mechanisms unable to track time that refuses to progress linearly. Boarding teams have entered chambers where they experience subjective hours, while their support elements outside reported only minutes passing. The reverse occurs with equal frequency. Teams spending what they perceive as brief periods inside the Hulk emerge to discover days or weeks have elapsed in real space. The most extreme temporal anomalies manifest as closed loops where events repeat endlessly. Exploration teams have discovered sections where the same sequence of actions plays out perpetually. A crew member reaches for a control panel, their hand moving through the same arc infinitely. A servitor walks the same 10-meter stretch of corridor, its footsteps echoing in perfect rhythm for centuries. These loops sometimes contain entire crews frozen in their final moments, dying repeatedly as the temporal distortion forces them to relive their deaths. The Space Hulk Chains of Damnation contained a command deck where the bridge crew had been trapped in a 15-second loop for over 3,000 years. They remained technically alive, their bodies sustained by the temporal anomaly, even as they experienced their ship's destruction countless times. Some temporal zones operate in reverse, with causality flowing backward. Wounds heal before they're inflicted, and bolter rounds return to their weapons before being fired. Imperial forces who enter these zones report profound disorientation as their minds struggle to process experiences in reverse chronological order. The Ultramarines encountered such a zone aboard the Hulk Dread Sovereign, where a battle brother was killed by a Genestealer attack that occurred several minutes before the creature actually struck. The warrior's body bore fatal wounds that appeared spontaneously, and he died before the alien responsible had entered the chamber. The Genestealers subsequently arrived and performed the exact movements that had created the wounds, its actions predetermined by the reversed causality. Time dilation creates pockets within space hulks where survivors from ancient eras remain alive, their subjective experience measuring only days or months while millennia pass in real space. The Adeptus Astartes have recovered crew members from vessels lost during the Great Crusade, their memories of that era providing invaluable historical data. These survivors often suffer severe psychological trauma, as their reality shifts from serving under the Emperor's direct command to awakening in the 41st millennium's darkness. Some refuse to accept that 10,000 years have passed, insisting their ships departed only weeks prior. Others go mad from the revelation, their minds unable to reconcile the temporal displacement. The most disturbing cases involve survivors who have aged at different rates than their environment. Boarding teams have found crew members who appear centuries old, despite their ships having been lost only decades prior, their bodies withered while their surroundings show minimal decay. The reverse occurs as well, fresh corpses discovered on vessels that vanished millennia ago, their decomposition suggesting death occurred recently. These inconsistencies make determining accurate timelines for space hulk events nearly impossible. A body found in advanced decay might have died yesterday, while a pristine corpse could be 10,000 years old. Warp rifts tear through space hulks with disturbing frequency, creating permanent breaches where the Imperium spills directly into real space. These rifts appear as tears in reality itself, wounds in space that bleed ethereal energy and impossible colors. They range from hairline fractures barely visible to the naked eye to massive rents spanning entire decks. The smallest rifts leak psychic radiation that causes headaches and nosebleeds in unprotected personnel. Larger rifts serve as gateways through which demons can manifest without the usual constraints that limit their presence in real space. Geller field collapse zones mark the locations where vessels lost their protection against the warp during translation. These zones never fully return to real space, existing in a perpetual state between dimensions. The boundaries shimmer like heat distortion, and crossing them produces immediate physical reactions, nausea, vertigo, and overwhelming dread. Unshielded humans who enter these zones suffer rapid psychological deterioration. Within minutes, they begin experiencing hallucinations. Within hours, they become violent or catatonic. Extended exposure results in mutation as the warp's influence physically alters their bodies. The Adeptus Astartes possess greater resistance to these zones due to their enhanced physiology and psycho-conditioning, but even space marines cannot remain in Geller field collapse zones indefinitely. The warp's touch bypasses physical defenses, attacking the mind and soul directly. Battle brothers have been recovered from these zones, displaying symptoms of possession or corruption, despite their genetic resistance to chaos. The Grey Knights, specialists in combating demonic threats, employ specialized wards and sanctified armor when operating in collapse zones, yet even they limit their exposure time to minimize corruption risk. Demonic manifestations occur spontaneously in areas where the warp's influence runs strongest. Lesser demons materialize without ritual or summoning, pulled through the weakened barriers between dimensions. These entities range from gibbering nurglings that infest ventilation systems to bloodletters that hunt through corridors seeking prey. Unlike demonic incursions in normal real space, which require specific conditions and often dissipate quickly, demons within space hulks maintain coherent form indefinitely. The ambient warp energy sustains them, allowing them to exist without the usual limitations that bind their kind. Greater demons occasionally establish permanent presence within space hulks, transforming entire sections into their domains. These areas become extensions of the demon's nature. Cornate domains run with blood that flows from walls and pools in chambers, while Nurglite sections rot and decay at accelerated rates. Zinchian spaces shift constantly, their geometry changing according to patterns only the demon comprehends. Slaneshi domains assault the senses with overwhelming stimuli, every surface designed to provoke sensation. The demons themselves become integral to the Hulk's structure, their essence woven into the metal and void. The phenomenon of possessed structures represents the ultimate corruption of space Hulks. The vessels themselves become demonic entities, their machine spirits subsumed and corrupted by warp presence. Bulkheads seal and unseal according to malevolent intelligence rather than mechanical failure. Life support systems activate in patterns designed to herd intruders toward specific locations. Automated defenses target some personnel while ignoring others, demonstrating clear preferential judgment rather than random malfunction. Tech priests who attempt to commune with these corrupted machine spirits report encountering awareness that mocks them in languages that predate human civilization. Some space Hulks achieve full sentience through demonic possession, becoming single unified entities with malign purpose. These Hulks actively hunt prey, using their ability to transition between warp and real space to appear near populated systems. They emit false distress signals to lure salvage teams and merchant vessels, then trap them within their structures. The Hulk feeds on the terror and death of those caught inside, growing stronger with each victim. The Inquisition has designated several such Hulks as extremis-level threats, authorizing exterminatus protocols if conventional purging proves impossible. The Space Hulk Perdition's flame exemplifies this phenomenon. First encountered in the Calixis sector, the Hulk demonstrated clear intelligence in its movements and actions. It appeared near shipping lanes, broadcasting automated distress calls that matched Imperial Navy protocols perfectly. Response teams who boarded found themselves separated and hunted by the Hulk's internal systems. Blast doors sealed behind them, cutting off retreat routes. Atmospheric processors flooded sections with toxic gases only after personnel had entered. The few survivors reported hearing laughter echoing through the corridors, not from any visible source, but from the Hulk itself. The greatest danger aboard space Hulks isn't the twisted architecture or temporal anomalies, it's the things that live there. These derelict vessels provide ideal habitats for Xenos organisms that thrive in darkness, confined spaces, and the absence of organized resistance. Among these threats, Genestealers represent the most pervasive and deadly infestation encountered by Imperial forces. Their presence transforms space Hulks from mere navigational hazards into active threats capable of seeding entire planetary populations with alien corruption. Genestealer infestations begin with a single organism or a small brood that survives aboard a derelict vessel. These creatures possess remarkable adaptability, capable of entering hibernation, states that last centuries when prey becomes scarce. When a space Hulk transitions from the warp, bringing fresh victims aboard through salvage operations or accidental boardings, the dormant Genestealers awaken. A single creature can establish an entire brood cycle through its ability to implant genetic material into host organisms. The infected victims don't die immediately. They return to their ships or stations, carrying the Genestealers' genetic curse with them. The brood cycle operates over multiple generations, each producing increasingly hybrid offspring. First-generation hybrids appear almost entirely human, displaying only subtle physical abnormalities that often go unnoticed in crowded hive cities or void stations. These hybrids possess complete human intelligence and emotional capacity, making them far more dangerous than their purebred ancestors. They integrate into human society, form families, and produce second-generation offspring that show more pronounced alien characteristics. Third-generation hybrids display obvious Xenos features, elongated skulls, extra limbs, and chitinous skin, forcing them to operate in the shadows of human civilization. Fourth-generation hybrids emerge as creatures clearly more alien than human, their bodies powerful and lethal, but still capable of using human weapons and equipment. These hybrids form the military arm of Genestealer cults, leading their earlier generation kin in coordinated attacks when the cult reaches sufficient strength. The cycle culminates with pure-restrained Genestealers, identical to the original progenitor, completing the transformation from human population to Xenos brood. This entire process occurs under the psychic direction of the Patriarch, the original Genestealer that established the infestation. Patriarchs develop from Genestealers that successfully create large broods. The transformation occurs gradually as the creature ages and its psychic power grows. Its carapace thickens and darkens, often taking on purple or deep blue coloration. Additional limbs sprout from its torso, and its cranium expands to accommodate its enhanced mental capabilities. The patriarch's psychic presence dominates its offspring, creating a hive mind that coordinates brood activities across vast distances. This psychic network allows the cult to operate with disturbing efficiency, their attacks synchronized despite individual cells having no physical contact. The Space Hulk Sin of Damnation hosts a Genestealer infestation that has persisted for millennia. Blood Angel's Terminators have boarded this Hulk repeatedly, purging thousands of the creatures each time, yet the infestation reestablishes itself between appearances. The Hulk's vast size and labyrinthine interior provide endless hiding places where small groups of Genestealers survive even the most thorough purges. These survivors hibernate until the Hulk next transitions to real space, then rebuild their numbers by attacking whatever unfortunate souls come aboard. The Patriarch of Sin of Damnation has grown to enormous size over the centuries, its psychic power capable of reaching across entire decks to coordinate its brood. Genestealers modify Space Hulk interiors to suit their needs, creating nest chambers in cargo holds and maintenance tunnels. They drag corpses and equipment into these nests, building elaborate structures from scavenged materials. The nests serve as breeding grounds where hybrids are born and raised, protected by multiple layers of Puristrain guardians. The creatures demonstrate surprising intelligence in their defensive preparations, setting ambush points along approach routes and creating kill zones where intruders face attacks from multiple directions simultaneously. They understand how to exploit the Hulk's architecture, using ventilation shafts and maintenance crawlways to outflank their enemies. The Death Watch maintains extensive records of Genestealer combat behaviors observed aboard Space Hulks. The creatures prefer close-quarters combat where their rending claws prove most effective. They attack from darkness whenever possible, their enhanced senses allowing them to navigate without light while their prey stumbles blind. Genestealers demonstrate pack tactics that suggest sophisticated communication, with some creatures deliberately drawing fire while others flank the distracted enemy. They show no fear of death, pressing attacks even when suffering catastrophic casualties, driven by the Patriarch's psychic imperatives. Orc infestations present entirely different challenges. Where Genestealers operate through stealth and infiltration, Orcs transform Space Hulks into mobile fortresses through sheer belligerent industry. A single Orc spore can establish a foothold that grows into a full Waaagh given sufficient time and resources. Space Hulks provide ideal environments for Orc settlement, vast quantities of scrap metal for construction, isolated sections where different clans can establish territories, and the constant possibility of combat against other inhabitants or boarding parties. Mechboys find Space Hulks particularly attractive, as the fused vessels contain countless examples of human, xenos, and ancient technology to loot and repurpose. These Orc engineers establish workshops in cargo bays and engineering sections, where they construct weapons, vehicles, and bizarre mechanical contraptions from salvaged components. The workshops produce constant noise, hammering, welding, and the roar of poorly tuned engines that echoes through surrounding corridors. Gretchen's servants scurry between workstations, carrying tools and components while avoiding the casual violence their larger cousins direct at anything within reach. Orc populations aboard Space Hulks organize into clan structures that mirror their society elsewhere. Goths establish training grounds where they practice close combat techniques against captured prey or each other. Bad Moons accumulate the best weapons and equipment, establishing themselves as the wealthiest clan through aggressive trading and occasional theft. Evil Sunts modify any vehicles they find aboard the Hulk, creating fast-moving transports for racing through the wider corridors. Deathskulls scavenge obsessively, painting everything they claim in their blue war paint, and believing this makes them lucky. The largest Space Hulks can support Orc populations numbering in the thousands, complete with hierarchical leadership under a warboss powerful enough to keep the various clans from constant infighting. These populations establish rudimentary infrastructure, fungus farms for food production, fighting pits for entertainment and dominance establishment, and armories where weapons are stored between raids. The orcs view the space hulk as both home and weapon, understanding that its eventual appearance in real space near populated systems provides opportunities for proper fighting against worthy opponents. Orc modifications to space hulk structure follow no coherent plan, resulting in additions that defy engineering logic. They weld armor plates over breaches without concern for structural integrity. They install weapons systems powered by jury-rigged reactors that would horrify any tech priest. They create new corridors by simply smashing through bulkheads with industrial equipment or explosives. Despite this apparent chaos, orc constructions function through principles that blend technology with their latent psychic field. If enough orcs believe something will work, it often does, regardless of physical impossibility. The Space Hulk Rock of Ages exemplifies orc adaptation to Space Hulk environments. Originally a collection of Imperial and Xenos vessels, the Hulk was claimed by a warboss named Urgork the Unstoppable during the 40th millennium. Over centuries, his clan transformed the Hulk into a mobile fortress, adding crude engines that provided limited maneuvering capability and covering the exterior with armor scavenged from destroyed ships. When the Hulk appeared in the Armageddon system, it disgorged thousands of orcs who joined the fighting on the planet's surface, while the Hulk itself served as an orbital base for continued reinforcement. Chaos cultist enclaves represent human populations that have embraced corruption while trapped aboard space hulks. These groups form from survivors of initial infestation or boarding actions who turn to the dark gods for survival. The cultists establish shrines in abandoned sections, decorating bulkheads with blasphemous symbols and conducting rituals that further corrupt the Hulk's already tainted environment. They sacrifice captured victims to their chosen deities, believing this worship will grant them protection or power sufficient to escape their prison. These cultist populations develop distinct characteristics based on their patron deity. Cornate cultists establish fighting pits where they battle each other or captured prisoners, offering the blood spilled to the blood god. They decorate their territories with skulls and maintain altars built from bones and weapons. Nurglite cultists embrace the decay around them, their bodies covered in sores and infections they consider blessings. They spread disease deliberately, contaminating water supplies and air systems to share their patrons' gifts. Tzeentchian cultists obsessively study the space Hulk's anomalies, believing they can discern patterns in the chaos that will grant them forbidden knowledge. Slaaneshi cultists pursue sensation and excess, their rituals involving acts of depravity that would earn immediate execution in Imperial space. Cultist enclaves sometimes number in the hundreds, particularly on larger hulks where multiple groups establish separate territories. They war against each other when their patron deities' interests conflict, but unite against external threats like Imperial boarding parties or rival Xenos populations. The cultists possess intimate knowledge of their territory, using hidden passages and trapped corridors to ambush intruders. They fight with desperation born from knowing that capture means execution, making them dangerous opponents despite their lack of formal military training. The cultists' presence accelerates space Hulk corruption, their rituals opening additional breaches to the warp and attracting demonic attention. Possessed cultists become common in these enclaves, their bodies hosting entities that grant them unnatural strength and resilience. The most powerful cult leaders achieve demonhood themselves, transforming into creatures that blur the line between mortal and warp entity. These demon princes rule their followers through a combination of genuine devotion and supernatural terror, their mere presence causing psychological damage to unprotected humans. Enslavers represent a threat that emerges specifically in areas where psychic activity or warp corruption runs high. These parasitic entities exist primarily in the Imperium, but can manifest in real space when conditions permit. Space hulks provide ideal hunting grounds, as the weakened barriers between dimensions allow enslavers to cross over without the usual constraints. They target psychers first, overwhelming their minds and using their bodies as anchors to maintain presence in real space. Once established, an enslaver can dominate multiple victims, creating a host collective that serves its alien purposes. Enslaver infestations spread through psychic contagion, each dominated victim becoming a vector for further infection. The creatures reproduce by forcing their hosts to undergo grotesque transformations, their bodies becoming incubators for new enslavers. The infestation grows exponentially if unchecked, potentially consuming entire ships within the hulk. Imperial forces who encounter enslaver infestations must eliminate all infected individuals immediately, as there is no cure for their domination. The Ordo Xenos maintains standing orders to destroy any space hulk showing signs of enslaver presence, as the risk of these entities reaching populated worlds justifies any cost. Psychnoine swarms infest space hulks that have spent extensive time in the warp, these creatures feeding on psychic energy and living prey alike. The wasp-like Xenos establish hives in the hulk's darker sections, their larvae implanted into corpses or captured victims. Adult Psychnoine patrol their territory in swarms, attacking anything that enters their domain. Their stings inject eggs directly into the victim's brain, and the larvae consume neural tissue as they develop. The victim remains alive and conscious during this process, experiencing indescribable agony as their mind is literally eaten from within. Psychnoine demonstrate particular hostility toward psychers, drawn to psychic emanations like predators to blood. They swarm psychers in overwhelming numbers, accepting heavy casualties to bring down their preferred prey. Imperial forces that include librarians or sanctioned psychers must take extreme precautions when operating in areas where Psychnoine presence is suspected. The creature's ability to phase partially into the warp makes them difficult to target with conventional weapons, and their numbers can overwhelm even well-prepared defenders. Necron vessel components occasionally appear integrated into space hulk structures, creating zones of particular danger. These sections maintain partial functionality despite millennia of drift, their living metal attempting to repair and restore systems according to ancient programming. Scarabs emerge from these sections, stripping surrounding vessels for raw materials to feed the repair processes. Occasionally, dormant Necron warriors activate when intruders approach, their targeting protocols still functional after millions of years. These warriors eliminate threats with emotionless efficiency, their Gauss weapons disintegrating targets at the molecular level. The presence of Necron components raises disturbing questions about how vessels constructed from living metal became trapped in space hulks. Necron technology should resist warp corruption and maintain functionality indefinitely, yet these sections show clear signs of damage and integration with other vessels. Some tech priests theorize that the Necrons deliberately seeded space hulks with their technology, using them as slow-moving scouts that eventually reach populated systems. Others believe the components represent tomb ships damaged during the war in heaven, their crews long since departed but their vessels continuing to drift through space. Human survivors occasionally persist aboard space hulks, maintaining small enclaves in defensible sections. These populations survive through salvage and careful resource management, avoiding the various threats that infest the hulk around them. They establish fortified positions in areas with functioning life support, rationing whatever supplies they can scavenge while hoping for rescue that often never comes. Generations pass, and these survivor communities develop unique cultures shaped by their isolation and constant danger. They worship the Emperor with fervor born from desperation, building shrines from scrap metal and conducting daily prayers for deliverance. These survivor populations sometimes prove hostile to rescue attempts, their isolation having bred paranoia and xenophobia that extends even to fellow humans. They view all outsiders as potential threats, attacking Imperial forces who attempt to extract them. Others have degenerated into cannibalism or mutation, their humanity eroded by centuries of exposure to the Hulk's corruption. The most tragic cases involve populations that maintain perfect Imperial faith and culture despite their circumstances, only to be exterminated by rescue forces who cannot risk the contamination they might carry. The Imperium's archives contain detailed records of thousands of space hulks encountered across 10 millennia of expansion and warfare. Among these countless derelicts, certain hulks have earned particular notoriety through repeated appearances, catastrophic incidents, or the recovery of invaluable artifacts from their corrupted corridors. These notable space hulks serve as grim reminders of the void's dangers and the price of venturing into the unknown. The Sin of Damnation stands as perhaps the most infamous space hulk in Imperial records. This massive conglomeration of fused vessels has appeared in real space 17 times over the past 6,000 years, each emergence bringing death and horror to whatever system it manifests within. The Hulk follows a predictable cycle, appearing in the Ultima Segmentum approximately every 3 to 4 centuries before vanishing back into the warp. Its composition includes vessels from multiple eras, with the oldest identifiable components dating to the 35th millennium. Imperial Navy frigates form the bulk of its structure, their Gothic architecture still recognizable despite millennia of corruption and damage. The Blood Angels chapter maintains extensive records regarding the Sin of Damnation, having boarded the Hulk on 7 separate occasions. Each operation aimed to purge the massive Genestealer infestation that dominates the Hulk's interior and recover gene seed from fallen battle brothers whose remains lie somewhere within the twisted corridors. The first recorded Blood Angels operation occurred during the 39th millennium, when Brother Captain Raphael led a strike force of 50 Terminators into the Hulk's depths. The mission recovered significant quantities of gene seed and archaeotech, but at terrible cost, only 16 Terminators survived to return to their strike cruiser. Subsequent Blood Angels operations followed similar patterns. Terminator squads penetrate deep into the Hulk, fighting through endless waves of Genestealers while searching for specific objectives. The creatures infesting the Sin of Damnation have adapted to Terminator tactics over millennia, learning to exploit weaknesses in the heavy armor through focused attacks on joints and eye lenses. They use the Hulk's architecture to maximum advantage, attacking from ventilation shafts and maintenance tunnels where Terminators cannot easily maneuver. The Genestealer Patriarch commanding the infestation has grown to enormous size, its psychic presence so powerful that unshielded humans experience crushing headaches when approaching within several decks of its nest. The most recent Blood Angels operation aboard the Sin of Damnation occurred in the closing years of the 41st millennium. Brother Captain Leonid led a force of Terminators equipped with storm bolters and power fists into the Hulk, supported by several Furioso dreadnoughts whose close combat capabilities proved essential in the confined spaces. The operation lasted 18 hours of continuous fighting, with Terminators advancing deck by deck through Genestealer-held territory. They recovered the remains of 37 battle brothers from previous missions, along with several suits of Terminator armor that had been lost for centuries. The gene seed recovery alone justified the mission's cost, though 12 Terminators died in the fighting, and another 4 suffered wounds severe enough to require internment in dreadnought sarcophagi. The Sin of Damnation's interior layout defies conventional mapping attempts. Corridors that appeared on one expedition's charts vanish entirely by the next boarding action, replaced by different passages leading to unknown sections. Tech priests theorize that the Hulk's structure shifts during its time in the warp, with vessels moving relative to each other and creating new configurations. This constant change forces each boarding team to navigate as if entering the Hulk for the first time, unable to rely on previous expeditions' maps or intelligence. The Genestealers demonstrate intimate knowledge of these shifting passages, using them to outmaneuver Imperial forces and strike from unexpected directions. The Devourer of Stars represents a different category of space Hulk entirely, one whose value lies not in military significance, but in the potential archaeotech contained within its ancient structure. This enormous Hulk appeared in the Segmentum Obscurus during the 40th millennium, its composition immediately attracting Mechanicus' attention. Preliminary surveys identified vessel components dating to the Dark Age of technology, their designs matching no known Imperial patterns. The presence of these pre-Imperial ships suggested the possibility of standard template construct fragments or other technological marvels that could revolutionize the Imperium's industrial capacity. The Adeptus Mechanicus dispatched multiple expeditions to the Devourer of Stars, each seeking to penetrate deeper into the Hulk and recover whatever treasures lay within. The first expedition, led by Magos explorator Deltrian V. Heck, confirmed the presence of Dark Age vessels integrated into the Hulk's core. These ships utilized construction materials that resisted all attempts at analysis, their hulls composed of substances that self-repaired minor damage and demonstrated properties inconsistent with known metallurgy. The expedition recovered several data cores from what appeared to be a merchant vessel's bridge, though the information stored within them remained encrypted by systems far more sophisticated than anything the Mechanicus possessed. Subsequent expeditions faced increasing resistance from the Hulk's indigenous threats. A massive orc population had established itself within several sections, their mechboys drawn to the same ancient technology that attracted the Mechanicus. Battles erupted between Skitarii forces and orc mobs, with both sides seeking to claim the most valuable salvage. The orcs had already looted extensively, carrying off components whose purpose they couldn't understand, but recognized as valuable through their instinctive understanding of technology. Tech priests recovered several pieces of archaeotech from orc workshops, the Xenos having partially disassembled them in failed attempts to incorporate the technology into their own crude weapons. The Devourer of Stars also contained sections where warp corruption ran particularly deep. Entire decks existed in states of temporal flux, their atmospheres cycling through different compositions as time flowed inconsistently. Explorator teams documented chambers filled with equipment that appeared brand new despite the vessels containing them being thousands of years old. Other sections showed advanced decay, their structures crumbling as if exposed to centuries of entropy in mere moments. These temporal anomalies made recovery operations extremely hazardous, as teams could find themselves trapped in time loops or aged to death within minutes of entering affected areas. The most significant discovery aboard the Devourer of Stars occurred when Mago's VHEX 4th expedition located what appeared to be a research vessel from the Dark Age. The ship's databanks contained fragmentary STC information related to advanced materials synthesis, though the data was incomplete and corrupted by millennia of exposure to the warp. The Mechanicus immediately classified this information at the highest levels, recognizing that even partial STC data represented knowledge worth more than entire Forge worlds. Recovery teams spent months extracting the databanks while fighting off orc attacks and navigating the temporal hazards. 12 tech priests died in the effort, but the recovered information eventually led to improvements in Imperial armor production that benefited Space Marine chapters across the galaxy. The Gallowdark emerged from the warp in recent years, its appearance coinciding with increased Tyranid activity along the eastern fringe. This space hulk differs from most others in its composition. Rather than consisting primarily of Imperial vessels, it contains a roughly equal mix of Imperial Navy ships, orc craft, and Xenos vessels from species the Imperium has never encountered. The fusion of these disparate elements created a structure of particular interest to the Death Watch, as it provided opportunities to study multiple alien technologies in a single location. Kill teams from several Death Watch chapters have conducted operations aboard the Gallowdark, their missions ranging from intelligence gathering to targeted elimination of specific threats. The Hulk's interior presents unique challenges due to the variety of vessel types integrated into its structure. Imperial sections follow familiar layouts that Death Watch veterans can navigate efficiently, but Xenos areas require careful exploration as their architecture follows alien logic. Orc sections feature crude modifications and trapped corridors, while the unknown Xenos vessels contain environmental hazards ranging from toxic atmospheres to gravity fluctuations that can crush unprotected personnel. The Gallowdark harbors multiple distinct threat populations that war against each other as much as they attack Imperial forces. Genestealer broods occupy several sections, their presence suggesting the Hulk may have spent time near Tyranid fleet elements before appearing in Imperial space. Orc mobs control other areas, their numbers suggesting a warboss has established dominance over the various clans. Most disturbing are the signs of chaos corruption in the Hulk's deepest sections, where cultist enclaves have established shrines and conduct rituals that further weaken the barriers between real space and the warp. Deathwatch operations aboard the Gallowdark focus on gathering intelligence about the unknown Xenos vessels and eliminating high-value targets among the indigenous populations. Kill Team Artemis conducted a particularly successful mission that resulted in the assassination of a Genestealer patriarch and the recovery of Xeno's artifacts for Ordo Xeno's study. The team penetrated deep into Genestealer-held territory, using their specialized training and equipment to avoid detection until they reached the Patriarch's nest. The resulting battle lasted 3 hours, with the kill team fighting through waves of pure-restrained Genestealers and hybrid defenders before finally bringing down the Patriarch with concentrated fire from heavy weapons. The Ulthros appeared during the Gothic War, emerging from the warp in the midst of the conflict between Imperial forces and Abaddon, the Despoiler's fleets. This ancient space hulk contained vessels from multiple eras, including several Imperial Navy warships that had vanished during earlier conflicts. The hulk's appearance created both opportunity and danger, the potential recovery of valuable equipment and gene seed balanced against the certainty of heavy Genestealer infestation, and the risk of Chaos forces claiming the Hulk for their own purposes. Imperial Navy surveys of the Ulthros identified it as containing significant quantities of archaeotech, including weapon systems and armor components that predated the Horus Heresy. Several of the integrated vessels had served during the Great Crusade, their armories potentially holding equipment whose quality surpassed anything produced by modern Forge worlds. The Mechanicus pressed for immediate salvage operations, arguing that the technology aboard the Ulthros justified any risk. The Imperial Navy agreed, though they insisted on significant military support for any boarding actions. The first major operation aboard the Ulthros involved elements from 3 Space Marine chapters: the Imperial Fists, the Aurora chapter, and the Nova Marines. The combined force totaled over 200 battle brothers, including 30 Terminators equipped specifically for close-quarters combat against Genestealers. The operation encountered immediate resistance as Genestealer broods swarmed the boarding parties, attacking with coordination that suggested a powerful Patriarch directing their movements. The Space Marines established beachheads in several sections, using heavy flamers and assault cannons to clear corridors and create defensible positions. The fighting aboard the Ulthros lasted for weeks, with Space Marine forces gradually pushing deeper into the Hulk while suffering steady casualties. The Genestealers had established elaborate nest structures throughout the Hulk, turning entire decks into breeding grounds defended by thousands of the creatures. Imperial forces encountered not just pure-restrained Genestealers, but also multiple generations of hybrids, some equipped with looted Imperial weapons and armor. The hybrids demonstrated disturbing tactical awareness, using cover effectively and coordinating their attacks with the pure-restrained broods. The temporal anomalies aboard the Ulthros complicated operations significantly. Several squads reported entering zones where time flowed backward, their movements feeling reversed and their equipment malfunctioning in ways that suggested causality inversion. 3 battle brothers from the Aurora chapter were lost in one such zone, their bodies discovered later showing wounds that appeared to have been inflicted before the weapons that caused them had been fired. The librarians accompanying the operation detected powerful psychic emanations from the Hulk's core, suggesting either a Patriarch of unusual strength or something even more dangerous lurking in the depths. Despite heavy casualties, the operation recovered significant quantities of gene seed from fallen battle brothers whose remains had been lost aboard the Ulthros during its previous appearances in real space. The Mechanicus teams accompanying the Space Marines salvaged several intact weapons systems from a Great Crusade-era battle barge, including plasma cannons, whose output exceeded modern equivalents by 30%. The archaeotech recovery alone justified the operation's cost from the Mechanicus perspective, though the Space Marine chapters measured success differently, in brothers lost and gene seed recovered. The Ulthros vanished back into the warp before Imperial forces could complete their purge of the Genestealer infestation. The Hulk's departure stranded several squads still operating in its interior, their fates unknown. When the Ulthros next appears in real space, Imperial forces will face the same infestation once again, the surviving Genestealers having rebuilt their numbers during the Hulk's time in the warp. The cycle continues indefinitely, each appearance bringing fresh opportunities for salvage and new casualties among those who dare board the ancient derelict. Space Hulk boarding operations represent some of the most dangerous combat scenarios Imperial forces face. The confined environments, hostile indigenous populations, and unpredictable structural hazards create conditions where conventional tactical doctrine proves inadequate. The Adeptus Astartes developed specialized approaches to Space Hulk combat over millennia of bitter experience, with Terminator armor deployment emerging as the standard response to these unique challenges. Terminator armor exists specifically for operations in environments where standard power armor cannot provide sufficient protection. The thick ceramite plating and reinforced joints allow Space Marines to survive in the absolute vacuum of space, endure extreme temperatures, and withstand impacts that would kill battle brothers in standard Mark 7 or Mark 10 plate. The armor's void, sealed nature makes it essential for Space Hulk operations, where hull breaches and atmospheric failures occur without warning. A Terminator can continue fighting even when explosive decompression tears the atmosphere from an entire deck, his armor's internal life support maintaining full functionality for extended periods. The close quarters effectiveness of Terminator armor stems from both its protective capabilities and the weapons systems it supports. Storm bolters provide sustained firepower in confined corridors, their twin-linked barrels capable of hosing down approaching enemies with mass reactive rounds. The weapons prove particularly effective against Genestealers, whose numbers often overwhelm defensive positions through sheer mass. A single Terminator can hold a corridor against dozens of the creatures, his storm bolter cutting down the leading elements while his armor absorbs the attacks of those that close to melee range. Power fists and chain fists give Terminators devastating close combat capability when enemies inevitably reach melee distance. The powered weapons tear through Genestealer carapaces and orc hide with equal efficiency, while also serving practical purposes in Space Hulk environments. Terminators use their power fists to breach sealed bulkheads, smash through debris-blocking corridors, and create emergency exit routes when primary passages become compromised. The chain fist's rotating teeth cut through reinforced doors and structural supports, allowing squads to bypass sealed sections or collapse corridors behind them to prevent enemy pursuit. Assault cannons mounted by Terminator heavy weapons specialists provide overwhelming firepower in situations where storm bolters prove insufficient. The rotating barrels spit hundreds of mass reactive rounds per minute, turning corridors into killing zones where nothing survives. The weapons excel at breaking Genestealer charges before the creatures close to melee range, though their prodigious ammunition consumption requires careful fire discipline. Terminators carrying assault cannons position themselves to cover key approach routes, their fields of fire overlapping with their squad mates to create interlocking zones of destruction. Heavy flamers serve critical roles in Space Hulk operations, their promethium streams purging Genestealer nests and clearing ventilation shafts where the creatures hide. The weapons prove equally effective against orc mobs, whose crude armor provides little protection against burning promethium that adheres to flesh and continues burning even after the initial attack. Heavy flamer specialists advance at the front of Terminator formations, using their weapons to clear rooms before their brothers enter. The psychological impact of the weapons cannot be understated. Even orcs, who fear little, hesitate when facing walls of burning promethium. Terminator squad organization follows strict tactical doctrine developed through centuries of Space Hulk operations. Standard squads consist of 5 battle brothers, with one designated as sergeant and equipped with additional close combat weapons. This small unit size allows squads to navigate the cramped corridors typical of Space Hulk interiors while maintaining sufficient firepower to handle most threats. The squad members position themselves in overlapping fields of fire, ensuring that enemies attacking from any direction face immediate response from multiple Terminators. Multiple squads coordinate their movements through the Hulk, maintaining Vox contact and supporting each other when one unit encounters overwhelming resistance. The squads advance in parallel through different sections, creating multiple penetration routes that prevent the enemy from concentrating their forces against a single point. When one squad encounters a sealed bulkhead or impassable debris, adjacent squads can breach through connecting passages to bypass the obstacle. This multi-axis approach proves essential in space Hulk environments, where single corridors often lead to ambush points or dead ends. Zone Mortali's combat doctrine governs space marine operations in confined environments like space hulks. The term encompasses the specific tactics, movement patterns, and engagement protocols necessary for fighting in spaces where conventional maneuver warfare becomes impossible. Zone Mortalis emphasizes methodical advancement, thorough clearance of each section before proceeding deeper, and the establishment of secure fallback positions at regular intervals. Corridor fighting represents the most common combat scenario aboard space hulks. The narrow passages limit the number of combatants who can engage simultaneously, negating numerical superiority and placing premium value on individual warrior quality. Terminators advance down corridors in staggered formation, with forward elements covering the immediate front while rear elements watch for attacks from behind or above. The formation allows the squad to respond to threats from multiple directions without exposing their flanks or rear to attack. Genestealers exploit ventilation shafts and maintenance crawlways to attack from unexpected angles, dropping onto terminators from above or bursting through deck plates from below. Veteran squads maintain constant awareness of their three-dimensional environment, checking ceiling vents and deck seams for signs of enemy presence. Motion trackers built into Terminator helmets provide warning of approaching threats, though the devices prove less reliable in space Hulk environments, where debris and structural movement create false readings. Bulkhead breaching requires careful coordination between squad members. The designated breacher positions himself before the sealed door, while his brothers provide covering fire and watch for enemy response. Power Fist strikes sealed mechanisms with sufficient force to shatter locking systems, while Chain Fists cut through reinforced materials that resist blunt force. Melt-a-bombs serve as alternatives when time permits their placement, the fusion charges reducing doors to molten slag within seconds. The breaching process creates noise that alerts enemies to Imperial presence, so squads must be prepared for immediate combat once they penetrate sealed sections. Terminators throw frag grenades through breached bulkheads before entering, the explosions clearing immediate threats and forcing enemies to take cover. The squad then advances rapidly through the opening, storm bolters firing as they spread out to secure the new section. Speed proves critical during these moments. Hesitation allows enemies to recover from the initial shock and mount organized resistance. The first Terminators through the breach accept the highest risk, drawing enemy fire, while their brothers exploit the distraction to establish firing positions. Secured beachheads serve as anchor points for extended operations deep within space hulks. These fortified positions provide rally points where squads can regroup, resupply, and receive reinforcements. Terminators establish beachheads in defensible locations, junctions where multiple corridors meet, cargo bays with limited entry points, or command centers with reinforced walls. The squad seal unnecessary entrances with welded bulkheads or collapsed debris, creating controlled access points they can defend efficiently. Beachhead defense requires different tactics than advancing operations. Terminators position themselves to create overlapping fields of fire covering all approaches, with heavy weapons specialists placed to maximize their effectiveness. Assault cannons cover the primary approach routes where enemy attacks will likely concentrate, while Storm Bolter-equipped Terminators handle secondary passages. The defenders establish fallback positions within the beachhead, creating multiple defensive lines that allow them to trade space for time if enemies breach the outer perimeter. Auspec's limitations plague space Hulk operations, degrading the sensor systems that Imperial forces rely upon in conventional combat. The devices detect motion, heat signatures, and energy emissions under normal conditions, providing tactical awareness of enemy positions and movements. Space Hulk environments overwhelm these sensors with interference from multiple overlapping ship systems, each broadcasting electromagnetic noise across various spectrums. Reactors in different vessels cycle through power fluctuations, creating heat signatures that mask living targets. Automated systems activate randomly, their energy emissions appearing identical to active weapons or equipment. Warp residue compounds the interference, its psychic emanations disrupting sensor function in ways that defy technical explanation. Auspex displays show phantom readings that disappear when investigated or fail to detect actual threats until they appear in visual range. Tech Marines attempt to filter the interference through specialized programs and modified sensor arrays, but the corrupted environment defeats most countermeasures. Terminators learn to trust their combat instincts and visual confirmation over sensor data, treating Auspex readings as supplementary information rather than reliable intelligence. The layered construction of space hulks creates additional sensor problems. Multiple decks stacked above and below the Terminator's current position generate readings that appear to originate from their immediate vicinity. An Auspex might show enemy contacts directly ahead when the actual threats occupy a deck above or below, their signatures bleeding through the intervening structure. Experienced sergeants learn to interpret these phantom readings, using them to build mental maps of enemy positions throughout nearby sections, even when precise locations remain uncertain. Vox communication suffers similar degradation, with squad channels experiencing static and dropout that disrupts coordination. Terminators maintain verbal discipline, keeping transmissions brief and repeating critical information to ensure understanding despite interference. Sergeants establish backup communication protocols using hand signals and predetermined movement patterns that allow squads to coordinate without Vox contact. The communication difficulties force greater autonomy on individual squads, with sergeants making tactical decisions based on their immediate situation rather than waiting for orders from command elements. Extraction protocols receive extensive emphasis during mission planning, as Terminators operating deep within space hulks require reliable evacuation methods if situations deteriorate beyond recovery. Teleportarium technology provides the primary extraction method, allowing squads to return instantly to their strike cruisers without fighting back through hostile territory. The process requires maintaining precise coordinate locks between the Terminator's positions and the teleportarium aboard their ship, a technical challenge complicated by space hulk drift and structural instability. Teleportarium operators aboard strike cruisers constantly update coordinate calculations as the space hulk shifts relative to their position. The massive derelicts rarely maintain stable trajectories, their movements influenced by gravitational forces, internal explosions, and warp currents that defy prediction. A coordinate lock established during initial deployment might shift dozens of meters within hours, placing extraction points inside solid bulkheads or open void if not continuously recalculated. Tech priests monitor these shifts through sophisticated tracking systems, adjusting coordinates and alerting ground commanders when extraction zones become compromised. Terminators carry locator beacons that transmit positioning data to the teleportarium, allowing operators to track their movements through the hulk and maintain accurate locks. The beacons broadcast on frequencies that penetrate the interference plaguing other communication systems, though their signals weaken when squads penetrate particularly deep into the hulk's core. Squads operating beyond reliable beacon range establish waypoints at regular intervals, positioning backup beacons that create a chain of signals leading back to their current position. Emergency evacuation procedures activate when squads face overwhelming enemy forces or encounter threats beyond their capability to handle. The sergeant signals for immediate extraction, and the teleportarium initiates emergency protocols that prioritize speed over precision. The resulting teleportation carries higher risks than standard operations. Terminators might arrive aboard their ship with minor injuries from materialization errors, or equipment might fail to fully translate. These risks prove acceptable compared to certain death if squads remain in untenable positions. Teleportarium malfunctions represent the nightmare scenario for space hulk operations. If the coordinate lock fails or interference disrupts the translation process, Terminators can materialize inside solid matter, in open void, or simply vanish into the warp. Chapters maintain extensive records of brothers lost to teleportarium failures, their genes seed unrecoverable, and their deaths serving as grim reminders of the technology's limitations. Despite these risks, teleportation remains the only practical extraction method for squads operating deep within space hulks, where fighting back to boarding craft would cost more lives than the occasional translation failure. Backup extraction methods exist for situations where teleportarium use proves impossible. Terminators can fight their way back to boarding craft or established beachheads, though this approach requires abandoning mission objectives and accepting heavy casualties during the withdrawal. Some operations pre-position Thunderhawk gunships in cargo bays or other large spaces within the Hulk, creating extraction points closer to operational areas. The gunships provide fire support during boarding actions and serve as mobile command posts, though their presence alerts enemies to Imperial operations and draws concentrated attacks. The most desperate extraction scenario involves Terminators sealing themselves in defensible positions and waiting for relief forces to fight through to their location. Squads have survived for days using this approach, their ammunition running low and their armor's power reserves depleting while they hold against endless enemy attacks. Recovery operations to extract trapped squads often cost more casualties than the original mission, but chapters refuse to abandon battle brothers while any possibility of recovery exists. The gene seed alone justifies the effort, though the symbolic importance of never leaving brothers behind drives these rescue attempts as much as practical considerations. The Dark Angels maintain traditions that stretch back to the First Legion's founding during the Unification Wars on Terra. Among these traditions, none carries greater weight than the Deathwing, the chapter's first company, whose bone-white armor marks them as the finest warriors the Dark Angels can field. The Deathwing specializes in operations where standard tactical doctrine fails, particularly boarding actions against space hulks and other void-borne threats. Their expertise in these operations stems from 10,000 years of accumulated experience, refined through countless engagements against Genestealer infestations and other Xenos threats that lurk within the twisted corridors of derelict vessels. The Deathwing's specialization in space Hulk operations began during the Great Crusade, when the First Legion encountered its first major Genestealer infestation aboard a cluster of derelict vessels near the Purtis Rift. The creatures proved resistant to conventional assault tactics, their speed and ferocity overwhelming tactical squads despite the Space Marines' superior training and equipment. The Lion, Primarch of the Dark Angels, recognized that these threats required warriors equipped with the heaviest armor available and trained specifically for close-quarters combat in confined environments. He designated the Legion's veteran companies for this role, equipping them with Terminator plate and drilling them in the specific tactics necessary for corridor fighting and room clearance. The tradition continued after the Horus Heresy, with the Reformed Dark Angels chapter maintaining the first company's focus on Terminator operations. The Deathwing became the primary response force for space Hulk threats appearing in systems near Dark Angels' operational areas. When Imperial authorities detected space Hulks entering populated systems, they transmitted requests for assistance that often reached the Dark Angels before other chapters. The Deathwing's reputation for thorough purges of Genestealer infestations made them the preferred choice for these operations, despite the chapter's secretive nature and reluctance to explain their methods to outsiders. The adoption of bone-white armor by the Deathwing traces to events on the Plains world, one of the Dark Angels' primary recruiting worlds. The planet's inhabitants lived as nomadic tribes, their culture centered around hunting the massive predators that roamed the grasslands. Dark Angels recruited from these tribes valued the warriors' natural tracking abilities and their comfort with extended operations in hostile environments. The chapter maintained a fortress monastery on the Plains world, with a small garrison of Space Marines overseeing recruitment and training of aspirants. A Genestealer-infested space Hulk appeared in the Plains world system during the 40th millennium, its trajectory placing it on collision course with the planet. The Hulk's velocity and mass meant that impact would cause extinction-level devastation, killing billions and rendering the world uninhabitable for centuries. The Dark Angels garrison lacked sufficient numbers to mount a proper purge of the Hulk, and reinforcements could not arrive in time to prevent the collision. The garrison commander, a Terminator sergeant named Cloud Runner, bearing the name tradition of his tribal origins, led the Fortress Monastery's entire Terminator-armored contingent aboard the Hulk in a desperate attempt to alter its course or destroy it entirely. The Terminators fought through the Hulk's interior, seeking the largest intact vessel that might still possess functional engines. They encountered Genestealer resistance that exceeded all tactical projections. The infestation had grown to enormous size during the Hulk's time in the warp, with thousands of the creatures defending their territory. The Dark Angels advanced through deck after deck, their storm bolters cutting down waves of Genestealers, while their power fists crushed those that closed to melee range. The fighting lasted for days, with the Terminators making incremental progress toward the Hulk's core, while their ammunition supplies dwindled and their armor accumulated damage. Cloud Runner's force eventually reached an ancient Imperial Navy battlecruiser that formed the Hulk's central mass. Its engine compartments remained partially functional, their plasma reactors still generating power after centuries of dormancy. The Terminators fought their way to the engine control centers, where they discovered systems that could be manually activated despite the lack of bridge control. The process required someone to remain in the engine compartments, manually regulating the plasma flow, while the others fought off Genestealer attacks. Cloud Runner ordered his brothers to return to the plane's world while he stayed behind, knowing the engine activation would flood the compartments with lethal radiation that even Terminator armor could not fully protect against. The engines fired, their thrust sufficient to alter the Hulk's trajectory away from the plane's world. The deflection saved the planet, though the Hulk broke apart under the stress of acceleration, its fused vessels tearing free from each other. Cloud Runner died in the engine compartments, his armor's life support failing as radiation poisoning destroyed his enhanced physiology. His brothers recovered his body after the Hulk's breakup, finding him still at the controls, his hands locked on the manual regulators even in death. The gene seed remained viable for extraction, allowing Cloud Runner's genetic legacy to continue through future generations of Dark Angels. The Plains World tribes learned of Cloud Runner's sacrifice and the actions of his squad. They honored the fallen Terminators through their traditional death ceremonies, painting their bodies with white ash and clay to symbolize the warrior's passage into the afterlife. When the Dark Angels chapter learned of this tribute, the Master of the Deathwing ordered that the first company adopt bone white armor in perpetual remembrance of Cloud Runner and his brothers. The color became the Deathwing's distinctive marking, setting them apart from other Dark Angels who wore the chapter's traditional dark green. The white armor served as a constant reminder that Deathwing Terminators accepted death as the likely outcome of their missions, yet fought on regardless. The cultural significance of the bone white armor extends beyond simple memorial. Deathwing Terminators view their armor as a death shroud, worn by warriors who have already accepted their mortality. This mindset creates a psychological advantage in combat. Terminators who expect to die fight with absolute commitment, taking risks that more cautious warriors might avoid. They advance into kill zones without hesitation, knowing that their sacrifice might allow their brothers to complete the mission. This mentality proves particularly valuable in Space Hulk operations, where Genestealer swarms can overwhelm even veteran warriors through sheer numbers. The Deathwing's willingness to trade their lives for mission success has led to numerous victories that conventional tactics could not achieve. The Deathwing maintains detailed records of every Space Hulk operation conducted by the First Company, their archives containing tactical data spanning thousands of engagements. These records document Genestealer behavior patterns, optimal breach points for different vessel types, and the specific threats associated with various Hulk configurations. Newly inducted Deathwing Terminators study these records extensively, learning from the experiences of brothers who fought and died in previous operations. The accumulated knowledge allows the Deathwing to approach each new Space Hulk with tactical understanding that other chapters lack, their operational planning informed by centuries of hard-won experience. Notable Deathwing operations include the purge of the Space Hulk Bane of Caliban, which appeared in the Cadian Gate region during the 41st millennium. The Hulk contained several vessels that had served in the Dark Angels fleet during the Horus Heresy, their presence suggesting the possibility of recovering chapter relics and gene seed from that era. The Deathwing deployed 3 full squads to board the Hulk, supported by Ravenwing elements who secured the boarding craft and maintained communications. The Terminators encountered immediate Genestealer resistance, the creatures having established a massive nest in what had once been a Dark Angel's strike cruiser's lower decks. The fighting aboard the Bane of Caliban lasted for 2 weeks, with Deathwing squads methodically clearing each section before advancing deeper into the Hulk. They discovered gene seed repositories that had remained sealed since the Heresy, their stasis fields still functioning after 10,000 years. The recovered gene seed represented genetic material from the original Legion, its purity uncorrupted by the millennia that had passed since the Heresy. The Deathwing also recovered several suits of Terminator armor that predated current patterns, their construction incorporating techniques the Mechanicus could no longer replicate. The mission cost 7 Terminator lives, but the chapter considered the recovered gene seed and equipment worth far more than the casualties suffered. The purge of the Space Hulk Charnel Shrine demonstrated the Deathwing's capability against threats beyond simple Genestealer infestations. The Hulk contained chaos-corrupted sections where cultist enclaves had established shrines to the ruinous powers. These cultists fought with fanatical determination, their ranks including possessed individuals whose bodies hosted lesser demons. The Deathwing deployed interrogator chaplains alongside the Terminator squads, their spiritual authority and psychic wards providing protection against demonic corruption. The chaplains led prayers and litanies during the advance, their words strengthening the Terminator's resolve while disrupting the demonic entity's ability to manifest fully in real space. The Deathwing encountered a Chaos Space Marine warband operating within the Charnel Shrine, their armor bearing the colors of the fallen, renegade Dark Angels who had sided with Luthor during the Heresy. The presence of these traitors transformed the mission from a standard purge operation into a hunt of the highest priority. The Deathwing pursued the Fallen through the Hulk's corrupted sections, engaging them in running battles through corridors twisted by warp exposure. The traitor Marines possessed intimate knowledge of Dark Angel's tactics, having once been brothers themselves, and they used this knowledge to set ambushes and exploit weaknesses in the Deathwing's approach. The hunt culminated in a chamber where the Fallen had established a defensive position around a warp rift, using its energies to sustain demonic allies. The Deathwing assaulted the position with overwhelming force, their storm bolters suppressing the traitors while assault cannons tore apart the summoned demons. The interrogator chaplains closed with the fallen leaders, their Crozius Arcanum smashing through corrupted armor to reach the traitors beneath. The Deathwing captured 2 of the fallen alive, dragging them back to the Dark Angel's Fortress Monastery for interrogation. The captured traitors would spend decades in the chapter's dungeons, subjected to the interrogator chaplain's methods until they repented their betrayal or died unrepentant. The recovery of ancient chapter relics from corrupted vessels represents a secondary but significant aspect of Deathwing operations. Space Hulks sometimes contain Dark Angel's vessels lost during the Heresy or the subsequent scouring. Their cargo holds preserving equipment and weapons from the Legion's glory days. The Deathwing prioritizes the recovery of these relics, viewing them as sacred artifacts that connect the modern chapter to its founding. Recovered weapons receive extensive purification rituals before being returned to service, their machine spirits cleansed of any corruption accumulated during their time aboard the Hulks. The Deathwing recovered the Sword of Luthor from the Space Hulk Perdition's End, the blade having been lost when the strike cruiser carrying it vanished during the scouring. The weapon had belonged to Luthor himself before his betrayal, and the Dark Angels considered its recovery essential to preventing it from falling into enemy hands. The Deathwing fought through heavy Genestealer resistance to reach the strike cruiser's armory, where they found the sword still secured in its stasis case. The recovery team extracted the weapon and fought their way back to their boarding craft, losing 3 Terminators in the withdrawal. The sword now resides in the rock, the Dark Angel's Fortress Monastery, displayed in a shrine where chapter members can view this tangible connection to their history. The integration of Deathwing tactical experience into broader Space Marine doctrine occurred gradually over millennia, as other chapters recognize the value of specialized training for void-borne operations. The Deathwing's methods for corridor fighting, room clearance, and coordinated squad movements became standard teaching at chapter training facilities across the Imperium. The Codex Astartes incorporated sections on Space Hulk operations that drew heavily from Deathwing tactical manuals, though the Dark Angels never officially acknowledged this contribution. Other chapters' first companies adopted similar specializations, training their Terminators in close-quarters combat and void operations, using principles the Deathwing had pioneered. The Deathwing's influence extended to Imperial Guard, void combat specialists, and naval armsmen, whose training incorporated modified versions of Space Marine tactics scaled for unaugmented humans. The fundamental principles remained consistent, methodical advancement, overlapping fields of fire, and the establishment of secure fallback positions. The Imperial Navy developed specialized boarding protocols based on Deathwing operations, their armsmen squads using tactics proven effective by centuries of Space Marine experience. The Deathwatch drew extensively from Deathwing expertise when establishing their own operational doctrine, recognizing that the Dark Angels' first company possessed unmatched experience in the specific combat scenarios the Deathwatch regularly encountered. The Deathwing maintains a training facility aboard the Rock, where newly inducted Terminators learn the specific skills necessary for Space Hulk operations. The facility includes mock-ups of various vessel types, allowing Terminators to practice breaching techniques and room clearance in environments that simulate actual Hulk conditions. Training scenarios incorporate live fire exercises against servitors programmed to mimic Genestealer movement patterns and attack behaviors. The Terminators practice fighting in zero gravity, toxic atmospheres, and complete darkness, conditions they will inevitably encounter during actual operations. Veterans of previous Space Hulk missions serve as instructors, passing their knowledge to the next generation of Deathwing warriors. The psychological conditioning Deathwing Terminators receive emphasizes the acceptance of death and the primacy of mission completion over individual survival. This conditioning builds on the standard Space Marine psycho-indoctrination, but takes it further, instilling a mindset where the Terminator views himself as already dead from the moment he dons the bone-white armor. This mental state eliminates hesitation and fear, allowing the warrior to function at peak efficiency even in the most desperate circumstances. The conditioning also reinforces the Deathwing's loyalty to the chapter and their commitment to hunting the fallen, ensuring that no Terminator will ever question orders or refuse missions regardless of the apparent suicide nature of the operation. The Adeptus Mechanicus views Space Hulks as sacred repositories of lost knowledge, their twisted corridors potentially containing standard template construct fragments worth more than entire Forge worlds. Every Space Hulk represents a chance to recover technology from the dark age of technology, when humanity's technical prowess exceeded anything the Imperium can currently produce. The Mechanicus dedicates enormous resources to Space Hulk investigation, deploying specialized explorator fleets and Skitarii cohorts to penetrate these derelicts and extract whatever archaeotech lies within. The potential rewards justify the substantial casualties these operations inevitably incur, as even a single intact STC fragment can revolutionize Imperial manufacturing capabilities across multiple sectors. Pre-heresy weapon systems recovered from Space Hulks demonstrate performance characteristics that modern Forge worlds struggle to replicate. Plasma weapons from that era maintain stable containment fields at higher output levels, delivering greater destructive power without the catastrophic failure risks that plague contemporary patterns. Volkite weapons, largely lost to production since the heresy, occasionally appear in the armories of vessels that served during the Great Crusade. These thermal ray weapons disintegrate targets at the molecular level, their effectiveness against heavy armor exceeding standard plasma weaponry. The Mechanicus prizes these discoveries above almost all others, as they represent technologies the Imperium has forgotten how to manufacture despite maintaining examples in various chapter armories. Power armor components from the Great Crusade era incorporate materials and construction techniques that surpass modern equivalents. The ceramite plating demonstrates greater resistance to penetration while weighing less than current production standards. Servo motors operate with higher efficiency, drawing less power while providing superior strength enhancement. Recovered suits often show minimal degradation despite millennia of exposure to void conditions and warp corruption, their self-repair mechanisms still functioning at levels that baffle tech priests who examine them. Chapters that recover pre-heresy armor components integrate them into their existing suits, creating hybrid patterns that combine ancient quality with modern systems. Dark Age of Technology artifacts represent the ultimate prize in Space Hulk salvage operations. These items date to humanity's apex, when standard template constructs guided manufacturing across thousands of colony worlds and technological innovation proceeded at rates the Imperium considers heretical to even contemplate. The artifacts range from personal equipment to massive industrial machinery, each piece incorporating principles that challenge the Mechanicus's understanding of physics and engineering. A Dark Age power cell might operate for millennia without recharging, its energy generation method completely opaque to examination. Construction materials demonstrate properties that shift based on environmental conditions, their molecular structures adapting in ways that suggest impossible levels of sophistication. The recovery of STC fragments triggers immediate classification at the highest levels of Mechanicus authority. These data cores contain manufacturing instructions for everything from agricultural equipment to weapon systems, their information representing the accumulated technical knowledge of humanity's golden age. Complete STC systems no longer exist. The Imperium has not discovered an intact standard template construct since before the Age of Strife. Instead, salvage teams recover fragments containing partial data, corrupted files that require extensive reconstruction, or single item templates that provide instructions for manufacturing one specific device. Even these fragments possess immense value, as they allow Forge worlds to produce equipment superior to anything currently in their manufacturing databases. The Adeptus Mechanicus maintains strict protocols for Space Hulk investigation, their procedures refined through 10,000 years of salvage operations. When Imperial authorities detect a Space Hulk entering a system, local Mechanicus representatives immediately assess its potential value based on preliminary scans and visual identification of component vessels. Hulks containing vessels from the Great Crusade or earlier receive highest priority, as their age suggests greater likelihood of valuable archaeotech. The Mechanicus dispatches explorator fleets to investigate these high-priority targets, their ships equipped with specialized scanning equipment and carrying substantial Skitarii forces for ground operations. Magos explorators lead these investigation missions, their authority extending over all aspects of the operation. These tech priests dedicate their existence to recovering lost knowledge, their augmented bodies incorporating specialized equipment for analyzing ancient technology. Many explorators replace significant portions of their organic components with mechanical systems optimized for archaeotech investigation, enhanced optical sensors capable of detecting minute construction details, manipulator arms equipped with tools for careful artifact extraction, and data processing centers that can analyze recovered information at speeds biological brains cannot match. The explorators view their work as sacred duty, believing that each recovered piece of technology brings the Omnissiah's knowledge back to humanity. Explorator teams include multiple tech priests with specialized expertise in different technological domains. Some focus on weapon systems, their knowledge allowing them to identify and safely extract functioning armaments from derelict vessels. Others specialize in power generation, seeking intact plasma reactors or fusion cores that can be recovered and studied. Information technology specialists search for data cores and cogitator banks, hoping to recover files that survived the vessel's destruction and subsequent corruption. Each specialist brings decades or centuries of experience to the operation, their accumulated knowledge essential, for identifying valuable artifacts among the countless tons of worthless debris that fill space hulks. Skitarii cohorts provide military support for explorator operations. They're augmented soldiers trained specifically for combat in void environments and confined spaces. These warriors bear little resemblance to baseline humans, their bodies heavily modified with cybernetic enhancements that increase their combat effectiveness while reducing their dependence on organic life support. Skitarii can fight in hard vacuum without protective equipment, their respiratory systems replaced with mechanical alternatives that extract oxygen from stored reserves or synthesize it from available materials. Optical enhancements allow them to perceive across multiple spectrums, detecting heat signatures and electromagnetic emissions that would remain invisible to unaugmented vision. Skitarii equipment emphasizes the Mechanicus's unique approach to warfare, combining ancient designs with cutting-edge augmentation. Galvanic rifles fire electromagnetically accelerated projectiles that punch through armor with devastating effect, their capacitors charged by the Skitarii's own internal power systems. Radium carbines irradiate targets with lethal doses of radiation, causing rapid cellular breakdown even when shots fail to penetrate armor. Arc rifles discharge electrical arcs that leap between multiple targets, particularly effective against densely packed enemies or electronic systems. The Skitarii employ these weapons with mechanical precision, their targeting protocols and fire discipline exceeding what unaugmented soldiers can achieve. The Mechanicus deploys Skitarii in formations optimized for space hulk operations, their tactical doctrine emphasizing methodical advancement and overwhelming firepower. Vanguard units equipped with radium weapons advance at the front of the formation, their radiation emissions forcing enemies to either retreat or suffer the effects of exposure. Ranger units with galvanic rifles provide long-range fire support, their enhanced targeting systems allowing them to place shots with pinpoint accuracy, even in the chaotic conditions typical of space hulk interiors. Infiltrator units scout ahead of the main force, their advanced sensors detecting enemy positions and identifying structural hazards before the formation reaches them. Cadaphran battle servitors accompany Skitarii cohorts on particularly dangerous operations, their heavily armored forms mounting weapons too large for standard infantry to carry. These cyborg constructs combine human neural tissue with extensive mechanical systems, creating weapons platforms that possess human intelligence but lack the weaknesses of fully organic soldiers. Cadaphran destroyers mount heavy grav cannons or plasma culverins, their firepower capable of suppressing enemy positions or breaching reinforced barriers. Cadaphran breachers carry arc claws and hydraulic crushing arms, designed for close combat against heavily armored opponents. The servitors advance without fear or hesitation, their programming eliminating the psychological factors that might cause organic soldiers to falter. Tech Priest engine seers embed themselves within Skitarii formations, their expertise essential for navigating space hulk environments and identifying valuable salvage. These junior tech priests lack the authority and experience of Magos explorators, but possess sufficient training to recognize archaeotech when they encounter it. The engine seers carry specialized equipment for field analysis, handheld auspex units calibrated to detect specific material compositions, data probe systems that can interface with ancient cogitator banks, and sample collection tools for extracting small pieces of interesting technology without damaging the larger artifact. They mark discovered items for later recovery, transmitting coordinates to the explorator fleet while the Skitarii continue their advance. The Mechanicus establishes secure zones within space hulks once Skitarii forces clear sufficient territory, these fortified areas serving as staging points for detailed salvage operations. Tech priests move into these zones with heavy equipment, industrial servitors for moving large artifacts, portable power generators to operate analysis equipment, and containment vessels for items that emit dangerous radiation or other hazards. The salvage teams work methodically through the secured sections, cataloging every piece of potentially valuable technology and determining which items warrant immediate extraction versus those that can wait for later recovery. Intact ship components represent significant salvage value even when they lack the historical significance of pre-heresy equipment. Plasma drives from Imperial Navy vessels can be extracted and refurbished for installation in newly constructed ships, their cores requiring less manufacturing effort than building completely new units. The Mechanicus carefully removes these drives from their mountings, their engineer teams spending days or weeks ensuring that the extraction process doesn't damage critical components. The recovered drives undergo extensive testing and refurbishment at Forge World facilities before being certified for installation, but this process still proves more efficient than manufacturing new drives from raw materials. Geller field generators command premium value in salvage operations, as these devices remain difficult to manufacture even by Forge World standards. The technology that allows ships to survive warp transit without succumbing to demonic corruption requires rare materials and precise construction that only the most advanced Forge Worlds can accomplish. Recovered Geller generators often show damage from the Space Hulk's warp exposure, their field projectors warped by the very energies they were designed to resist. Tech priests examine each recovered generator carefully, determining whether repair is possible, or if the unit can only serve as a source of spare components for other devices. Weapon batteries salvaged from derelict warships provide the Imperial Navy with replacement armaments for vessels damaged in combat. Macro cannons, lance batteries, and torpedo tubes can be extracted from hulks and installed on active warships, reducing the time and resources required to return damaged vessels to combat readiness. The Mechanicus prioritizes recovery of weapons from larger vessels, battleship-grade armaments that few Forge Worlds can manufacture in quantity. A single recovered lance battery might take years to produce from raw materials, but only months to extract, refurbish, and install in a vessel requiring replacement weapons. The economic impact of successful Space Hulk salvage extends throughout entire sectors, as recovered technology and components flow through the Imperium's industrial infrastructure. Forge Worlds that receive salvaged archaeotech can reverse engineer improved versions of their current products, increasing manufacturing efficiency and output quality. The improvements cascade through supply chains. Better armor production means Space Marine chapters receive superior equipment. Improved weapons manufacture allows Imperial Guard regiments to field more effective armaments. Enhanced ship components increase the Imperial Navy's combat capabilities. A single Space Hulk salvage operation might yield technology that improves Forge World production by 5 or 10%, a seemingly small increase that translates to thousands of additional weapons, vehicles, and equipment pieces produced annually. Sector economies experience measurable growth following major salvage operations, as the influx of recovered technology stimulates manufacturing and trade. Forge Worlds increase production to meet demand from military forces seeking to acquire the improved equipment. Merchant fleets expand to transport the additional goods, creating employment and generating tax revenue for planetary governments. Naval shipyards receive contracts to refit vessels with salvaged components, their workers spending years installing recovered systems and training crews in their operation. The economic activity generated by a single large Space Hulk salvage can sustain sector growth for decades, the initial recovery operation creating ripple effects that touch billions of lives. The Mechanicus guards its salvage operations jealously, viewing recovered technology as rightfully belonging to the cult Mechanicus rather than the broader Imperium. This attitude creates tension with other Imperial institutions who believe valuable artifacts should be distributed based on military necessity rather than Mechanicus preference. Space Marine chapters that participate in Space Hulk purges expect to retain any chapter-specific equipment they recover, gene seed, weapons bearing their heraldry, or armor components from their own vessels. The Mechanicus sometimes disputes these claims, arguing that all archaeotech falls under their jurisdiction regardless of its origin. These disputes occasionally escalate to the point where chapters threaten to withdraw cooperation from future operations unless the Mechanicus respects their salvage rights. The Inquisition maintains oversight of Space Hulk salvage operations, their representatives ensuring that recovered artifacts don't pose corruption risks or contain forbidden technology. Inquisitors embedded with explorator fleets examine significant discoveries, their authority allowing them to classify items as too dangerous for general distribution. Chaos-corrupted artifacts receive immediate destruction orders, their taint rendering them worthless regardless of their technical sophistication. Xeno's technology triggers careful evaluation. Some items prove useful enough to warrant study despite their alien origin, while others demonstrate capabilities that suggest dangerous principles the Imperium should not pursue. The Inquisition's involvement frustrates the Mechanicus, who view the restrictions as obstacles to knowledge recovery, but the tech priests grudgingly accept that some discoveries genuinely pose risks that outweigh their potential value. Competing salvage claims between different Forge worlds create additional complications in Space Hulk operations. Multiple Forge worlds might dispatch explorator fleets to investigate the same Hulk, their representatives arriving to discover rivals already conducting salvage operations. The Mechanicus maintains elaborate protocols for resolving these disputes, based on factors including which fleet arrived first, which Forge world has greater need for the recovered technology, and which explorator team can demonstrate superior capability to extract and utilize the artifacts. These negotiations sometimes consume more time than the actual salvage work, with tech priests arguing over obscure precedents and technical interpretations, while valuable artifacts remain unrecovered aboard the Hulk. The most contentious disputes involve SDC fragments, whose immense value makes every Forge world desperate to claim them. The Mechanicus theoretically shares SDC data across all Forge worlds, but the reality involves careful political maneuvering and negotiated exchanges. A Forge world that recovers an SDC fragment gains enormous prestige and leverage within Mechanicus politics, as other Forge worlds must negotiate for access to the recovered information. The discovering Forge world can demand concessions, favorable trade agreements, political support in Mechanicus councils, or access to other Forge worlds' proprietary manufacturing techniques. These negotiations shape Mechanicus politics for centuries after major SDC discoveries, the recovered knowledge serving as currency in the endless competition between Forge worlds. Space Hulk salvage operations face constant time pressure, as the derelicts rarely remain in real space indefinitely. Drifter Hulks might vanish back into the warp with minimal warning, taking their contents with them, and stranding any salvage teams still aboard. The Mechanicus balances the desire to conduct thorough recovery operations against the risk of losing both the artifacts and the personnel attempting to recover them. Explorators establish strict time limits for salvage work, calculating the maximum duration they can safely operate before the Hulk shows signs of imminent warp translation. When those signs appear, increased psychic emanations, structural instability, or auspex readings indicating dimensional weakness, the explorators order immediate evacuation regardless of uncompleted salvage work. The loss of salvage teams aboard vanishing space hulks represents an acceptable cost in Mechanicus calculations, the potential knowledge recovery justifying the personnel casualties. Tech priests who volunteer for space Hulk operations understand the risks, their faith in the Omnissiah allowing them to accept death in service of knowledge recovery. Skitarii forces view their role as sacred duty, their augmented bodies and programmed loyalty, eliminating any hesitation about entering situations where survival seems unlikely. The Mechanicus maintains extensive records of personnel lost during salvage operations, their names recorded in the Forge World's archives as martyrs who died, advancing humanity's understanding of ancient technology. Space Hulks serve as the primary vector for Genestealer infiltration of Imperial worlds, their unpredictable appearances in populated systems delivering alien corruption directly into humanity's heartland. When a Hulk materializes near an inhabited planet, salvage crews and naval personnel board the derelict seeking valuable equipment and technology. These teams rarely understand the danger they face until Genestealers emerge from the darkness, their rending claws tearing through void suits, and their ovipositors implanting genetic material into the survivors. The infected personnel return to their ships and stations, carrying the Genestealer curse with them. Within weeks, the first-generation hybrids are born, beginning a cycle that transforms entire planetary populations into Xenos tainted cultists awaiting their alien masters. The infection spreads through normal human reproduction, each generation producing offspring that bear increasingly obvious alien characteristics. First-generation hybrids appear almost entirely human, their only abnormalities subtle enough to escape notice in most Imperial populations. Slightly elongated skulls, unusually pale skin, or eyes that reflect light at odd angles, these minor deviations get dismissed as genetic quirks or birth defects. The hybrids possess complete human intelligence and emotions, allowing them to integrate seamlessly into Imperial society. They marry, produce children, and establish themselves in positions where they can influence local politics and economy. Their loyalty belongs entirely to the brood, their minds linked through the Patriarch's psychic network that coordinates cult activities across the infected world. Second-generation hybrids show more pronounced Xenos features, hunched postures, elongated limbs, and skin that takes on a chitinous quality. These individuals cannot pass as normal humans under close scrutiny, forcing them to operate in the shadows of Imperial civilization. They inhabit underhives and abandoned industrial sectors, places where Imperial authorities rarely venture, and where physical abnormalities attract less attention among populations already marked by mutation and genetic damage. The second-generation hybrids serve as the cult's labor force, their enhanced strength and resilience making them valuable for physical tasks that advance the brood's goals. Third-generation hybrids emerge as creatures clearly more alien than human, their bodies displaying multiple arms, reverse-jointed legs, and heads that elongate into distinctly Xenos shapes. These hybrids possess strength that rivals unaugmented space marines, their musculature dense and powerful despite their relatively small frames. They form the cult's military arm, training with weapons looted from planetary defense forces or smuggled through corrupted supply chains. The third-generation hybrids demonstrate tactical awareness that exceeds what their appearance might suggest, their human intelligence combined with alien instincts creating soldiers capable of sophisticated coordinated attacks. Fourth-generation hybrids appear as creatures that barely qualify as human, their bodies covered in chitinous plates and their limbs ending in claws rather than hands. These hybrids retain enough human characteristics to use weapons and equipment, making them more versatile than pure-strained Genestealers while maintaining the aliens' physical prowess. They lead cult military operations, their presence on the battlefield coordinating the various hybrid generations and directing their attacks with precision that reflects the Patriarch's strategic thinking. The fourth generation represents the final step before the cycle completes itself with the birth of pure-strained Genestealers identical to the original progenitor. The Patriarch directs this entire process through psychic bonds that link every member of the cult into a single consciousness. The creature develops from a Genestealer that successfully establishes a large brood, its body transforming as its psychic power grows. The Patriarch's carapace thickens and darkens, taking on deep purple or blue coloration that distinguishes it from lesser Genestealers. Additional arms sprout from its torso, and its skull expands to accommodate enhanced mental capabilities. The Patriarch's psychic presence dominates its offspring absolutely, their thoughts and actions guided by its will even when they operate thousands of kilometers away from its physical location. The psychic beacon phenomenon represents the most dangerous aspect of Genestealer cult development. When a cult reaches sufficient size and the Patriarch's power grows strong enough, the creature begins broadcasting a psychic signal into the void. This beacon operates on frequencies that resonate through the warp, calling across vast interstellar distances to entities that hunger for the biomass the cult has prepared. Tyranid hive fleets detect these beacons from light years away, their hive minds drawn to the promise of abundant prey concentrated on a single world. The beacon guides the hive fleet toward the infected system, providing a psychic lighthouse that allows the Tyranids to navigate through the warp with greater precision than their usual blind questing. The cultists themselves remain unaware of their true purpose until the Hive fleet arrives. They believe they worship the Patriarch as a divine being, their faith genuine even as it leads them toward extinction. The cult develops elaborate religious structures around the Patriarch, their rituals and ceremonies mimicking imperial faith while inverting its meaning. They pray to the four-armed emperor, a deity they believe will deliver them from the Imperium's oppression and elevate them to positions of power in a new order. The cultists view their physical mutations as blessings, signs that they have been chosen for greatness. They recruit new members from imperial populations, spreading their faith among the disaffected and desperate who seek meaning in lives of grinding poverty and endless toil. The cult operates in cells that maintain minimal contact with each other, their structure designed to resist imperial investigation. Each cell contains members from multiple hybrid generations, with first-generation hybrids providing leadership and public faces, while later generations handle military operations and physical labor. The cells communicate through the Patriarch's psychic network rather than conventional means, making their coordination invisible to imperial authorities who might intercept Vox transmissions or written messages. This cellular structure allows cults to survive even when imperial forces discover and purge individual cells. The surviving elements continue operating independently until they can re-establish contact through the Patriarch's mental bonds. Cults infiltrate planetary governments and military forces over generations, their first-generation hybrids rising to positions of authority through competence and careful manipulation. A hybrid might serve as a junior administrator for decades, slowly advancing through imperial bureaucracy while recruiting subordinates and placing fellow cultists in key positions. By the time the cult reveals itself through open rebellion, its members control critical infrastructure, power generation facilities, water treatment plants, communications networks, and weapons depots. This infiltration allows cults to cripple planetary defenses before imperial forces recognize the threat, their sabotage creating chaos that the cult's military elements exploit through coordinated attacks. The world of Gossar Quintus demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of Genestealer cult infiltration delivered through space Hulk contact. The planet served as a major industrial center in the Ultima Segmentum, its manufactorums producing weapons and equipment for Imperial Guard regiments across multiple sectors. When a space Hulk appeared in the system during the early 41st millennium, planetary authorities dispatched salvage teams to investigate potential technology recovery. The teams boarded the Hulk without adequate military escort, their focus on salvage operations, blinding them to proper security protocols. Genestealers attacked the salvage crews, killing most, but allowing several infected individuals to escape back to their landers. The infection spread through Gossar Quintus's population over the next century, the cult growing from a handful of first-generation hybrids to a movement that numbered in the millions. The cultists established themselves in the planet's underhives, where overcrowding and minimal imperial oversight allowed them to operate freely. They recruited from the worker populations that labored in the manufactorums, offering hope and community to people who had known only exploitation and suffering. The cult's message resonated with these workers, promises of liberation from the Imperium's grinding demands, of elevation to positions where they would no longer serve as expendable labor. The cult's first-generation hybrids infiltrated planetary government and military command structures, their human appearance allowing them to pass security screenings that would have detected later generation hybrids. One hybrid rose to become deputy administrator of the Planetary Defense Force Logistics Division, a position that gave him access to weapons stockpiles and deployment schedules. Another served as a senior clerk in the governor's palace, her duties including maintenance of security protocols and visitor screening procedures. These infiltrators spent decades in their positions, never acting suspiciously and always demonstrating loyalty to the Imperium while quietly advancing the cult's interests. When Hive Fleet Jormungandr detected the Patriarch's beacon and altered course toward Gossar Quintus, the cult received psychic impressions of approaching salvation. The Patriarch's mental communications intensified, its thoughts filled with images of the Star Children, who would deliver the faithful from Imperial oppression. The cultists prepared for the day of ascension, stockpiling weapons and conducting final recruitment drives among the planetary population. The cult's military elements trained intensively, their exercises conducted in abandoned industrial sectors where Imperial authorities never ventured. The uprising began when the Hive fleet entered the system, its bioships appearing on Auspex displays as the largest concentration of organic matter Imperial forces had ever detected. The cult's infiltrators activated simultaneously across the planet, their coordinated actions crippling Gossar Quintus's defenses before military forces could respond. The deputy administrator issued orders that deployed the planetary defense force away from critical infrastructure, sending regiments to remote locations on false reports of cult activity. The governor's clerk disabled security systems throughout the palace, allowing hybrid assault teams to storm the building and slaughter the planetary leadership before guards could mount effective resistance. Cult forces seized control of the primary spaceport, their hybrid warriors overwhelming the naval armsmen who garrisoned the facility. The cultists destroyed defense batteries and disabled orbital weapons platforms, leaving Gossar Quintus defenseless against the approaching Tyranid fleet. The planet's manufactorums fell under cult control, their workers revealing themselves as cultists who had waited years for this moment. Imperial Guard regiments stationed on the planet found themselves fighting enemies who knew their deployment patterns, supply routes, and defensive positions, information leaked by cult infiltrators over decades of patient preparation. The Tyranid invasion began within days of the cult uprising, bioships entering orbit and deploying millions of organisms onto Gossar Quintus's surface. The cultists welcomed the Tyranids as liberators, their faith absolute even as the first waves of termagants and hormagaunts began slaughtering them alongside Imperial forces. The Patriarch broadcast joy and triumph through its psychic network, its thoughts celebrating the arrival of the hive mind. The cultists died willingly, offering no resistance as the Tyranids consumed them along with the rest of the planetary population. Within months, Gossar Quintus had been stripped of all biomass, its cities reduced to empty husks, and its population converted into genetic material for the Hive fleet. The Ordo Xenos maintains extensive protocols for dealing with space Hulk appearances near inhabited systems, their procedures designed to prevent scenarios like Gossar Quintus from recurring. When Imperial authorities detect a space Hulk entering a populated system, they immediately transmit alerts to the nearest inquisitorial fortress and request Ordo Xenos' investigation. Inquisitors assess the threat level based on the Hulk's size, composition, and trajectory. Hulks on collision courses with inhabited worlds receive immediate military response. Imperial Navy vessels move to intercept and either destroy the Hulk or alter its trajectory away from the planet. Hulks that enter stable orbits or drift through systems without immediate collision risk trigger quarantine protocols. The Ordo Xenos establishes exclusion zones around these Hulks, forbidding any approach without explicit inquisitorial authorization. Naval patrols enforce the quarantine, their orders including destruction of any vessel that attempts to board the Hulk without proper clearance. These measures prevent the opportunistic salvage operations that allowed Genestealer infiltration of worlds like Gossar Quintus, though they also frustrate Mechanicus interests who view the quarantines as obstacles to valuable technology recovery. Inquisitors coordinate with Space Marine chapters to conduct initial reconnaissance of quarantined Hulks, their operations focused on determining whether Genestealer or other Xenos infestations pose immediate threats. Deathwatch kill teams perform these reconnaissance missions, their mixed chapter composition providing diverse expertise for handling whatever threats they encounter. The kill teams board Hulks with strict time limits and extraction protocols, their missions designed to gather intelligence rather than conduct full purges. They map accessible sections, identify signs of indigenous populations, and recover samples of any biological material they discover. The intelligence gathered during reconnaissance operations determines whether the Ordo Xenos authorizes full boarding actions or orders the Hulk's destruction. Hulks showing signs of massive Genestealer infestation typically receive destruction orders, the risk of cult seeding outweighing any potential salvage value. The Imperial Navy bombards these hulks with lance strikes and torpedo spreads, their sustained fire breaking the derelicts apart and scattering the debris across the system. Some fragments survive this bombardment, their structural integrity sufficient to withstand naval weapons fire. These fragments receive individual attention from Navy destroyers, their crews methodically eliminating each piece until nothing remains large enough to harbor surviving Genestealers. Hulks that contain valuable archaeotech, but also show Genestealer presence, create difficult decisions for Inquisitors, who must balance the potential technology recovery against contamination risks. These situations often result in limited boarding operations, where Space Marine forces conduct targeted strikes to reach specific salvage objectives while avoiding full engagement with the infestation. Terminator squads penetrate to predetermined coordinates, recover designated artifacts, and extract immediately without attempting to purge the entire hulk. The Mechanicus protests these limited operations, arguing that thorough salvage could recover additional valuable technology, but the Ordo Xenos maintains that preventing cult seeding takes precedence over maximizing salvage returns. The detection of psychic beacons emanating from space hulks triggers the highest level threat responses, as these signals indicate Patriarch presence and potential Tyranid attraction. Inquisitors who detect beacon transmissions immediately alert Battle Fleet Command and request maximum military response. The Imperial Navy deploys capital ships to destroy beacon-emitting hulks, their orders including complete annihilation regardless of salvage value or Mechanicus protests. These operations sometimes occur too late. The beacon might have transmitted for months or years before detection, its signal already reaching across the void to hive fleets that have altered course toward the source. Systems where beacon-emitting hulks appeared receive intensive inquisitorial investigation focused on identifying any cult infiltration that occurred before the hulk's destruction. Interrogator teams examine salvage crews and naval personnel who had contact with the hulk, searching for signs of infection or hybrid characteristics. Anyone showing suspicious features receives immediate quarantine and examination by biologist specialists who can detect Genestealer genetic markers. Confirmed infections result in execution, the infected individuals' bodies cremated to prevent any possibility of cult establishment. These purges sometimes claim hundreds of lives, entire salvage crews eliminated when even a single member shows signs of infection. Planetary populations where infected individuals return before detection face systematic screening operations that can last for years. Inquisitorial agents work through population registries, examining birth records and medical files for patterns that suggest hybrid presence. Families showing multiple members with unusual genetic characteristics receive investigation, their genealogies traced back generations to identify the infection's origin point. The Inquisition maintains that early detection prevents the cult from establishing the deep infiltration that allowed tragedies like Gossar Quintus, though the screening operations themselves cause significant social disruption and economic damage. The strategic threat posed by Space Hulk-delivered Genestealer cults extends beyond individual planetary infections. The Tyranid hive fleets use these beacons as navigation aids, their approach vectors guided by the psychic signals that cultists broadcast. A single Space Hulk appearance might seed cults on multiple worlds if salvage crews from different planets board the derelict, each infected team carrying the curse back to their home systems. These multiple infection points create a constellation of beacons that guide hive fleets toward entire sectors, the combined psychic signals drawing the Tyranids into regions where they can consume numerous worlds in rapid succession. The Ordo Xenos tracks Space Hulk movements across the galaxy, their records documenting appearances and attempting to predict future manifestations. Certain hulks follow patterns that suggest intelligence or purpose rather than random warp drift. They appear repeatedly in populated systems, their timing coinciding with periods when Imperial defenses are weakened by war or internal conflict. Inquisitors debate whether these patterns indicate chaos influence directing the hulks toward vulnerable targets, or whether the Tyranid hive mind has learned to manipulate Space Hulk trajectories through methods Imperial authorities cannot comprehend. Either possibility represents a strategic threat that could undermine Imperial defense planning across entire segmentums. Space hulks drifting through the warp accumulate more than physical damage and Xenos infestations. The Imperium's touch corrupts everything it contacts, and vessels exposed to its energies without Geller field protection become breeding grounds for demonic manifestation and chaos worship. Traitor Legion warbands recognize this corruption as opportunity rather than threat, viewing space hulks as ready-made fortresses that require no construction or conquest. These ancient derelicts provide mobile bases that appear unpredictably throughout Imperial space, allowing chaos forces to strike at targets far from the Eye of Terror or other warp rifts where they typically operate. The transformation of space hulks into chaos strongholds begins during their time in the warp. Demons manifest within the unprotected vessels, their presence warping metal and corrupting machine spirits. Bulkheads grow organic protrusions that pulse with unnatural life. Corridors twist into configurations that serve demonic purposes rather than human function. The ships themselves become extensions of chaos, their structures adapting to house the entities that claim them. When these hulks transition back to real space, they carry their corruption with them, appearing as monuments to the Dark God's power rather than simple derelict vessels. Chaos Space Marine warbands board these corrupted hulks when they appear near Traitor Legion strongholds or fleet elements. The Word-bearers particularly favor space hulk acquisition, their dark apostles recognizing the vessel's potential as mobile temples. A warband might claim an entire section of a hulk, establishing shrines and summoning circles throughout the corrupted corridors. The Word-bearers conduct rituals that further bind demons to the hulk's structure, creating permanent manifestations that guard their territory against intruders. These demon-infested sections become sanctuaries where the traitor Marines worship their chosen deities, their prayers and sacrifices strengthening the warp's hold on the vessel. The Death Guard employ space hulks as plague ships, their presence accelerating the decay that warp exposure initiates. When Death Guard forces claim a hulk, they introduce diseases and toxins that transform the derelict into a vector for Nurgle's gifts. The atmosphere becomes thick with contagion, every surface coated with bacterial films that cause rapid infection in unprotected personnel. Rust spreads across metal surfaces at visible rates, the corrosion following patterns that suggest intelligence rather than simple chemical reaction. Pools of toxic sludge collect in low-lying areas, their contents breeding new strains of disease that the Death Guard cultivate for use in their ongoing campaigns against the Imperium. The transformation serves practical purposes beyond simple worship. Death Guard warbands use their plague hulks as mobile bases for extended operations in Imperial space, the vessels providing sanctuary where the traitor Marines can maintain their equipment and prepare for raids. The hulk's unpredictable appearances allow the Death Guard to strike at targets throughout a sector before vanishing back into the warp, their mobility preventing Imperial forces from mounting effective counterattacks. The contagions aboard these hulks also serve as weapons. When a plague hulk appears near an inhabited world, its atmospheric venting releases clouds of disease organisms that drift toward the planet on solar winds. Populations begin dying before the Death Guard even make planetfall, their immune systems overwhelmed by pathogens engineered through millennia of Nurgle's blessing. The Black Legion utilizes space hulks as staging points for Black Crusade operations, their warbands claiming sections of larger hulks that can accommodate significant force concentrations. Abaddon the Despoiler personally directed the corruption of several massive space hulks during the 13th Black Crusade, his sorcerers conducting rituals that bound greater demons to the vessel's structures. These corrupted hulks served as mobile fortresses that appeared throughout the Cadian Gate, their sudden manifestations delivering thousands of Chaos Space Marines directly into Imperial-held systems. The Black Legion established command centers aboard these hulks, their Chaos Lords coordinating multi-system attacks from chambers decorated with the skulls of fallen enemies and banners taken from defeated Imperial forces. The wargear salvage potential of space hulks attracts Traitor Legion attention as much as their strategic mobility. Ancient vessels integrated into Hulk structures sometimes contain weapons and equipment from the Horus Heresy era, their armories preserving gear that predates the Traitor Legion's exile to the Eye of Terror. These pre-heresy weapons maintain superior quality compared to equipment manufactured in the Eye's Forge Fanes, where constant warp exposure degrades manufacturing precision. A Chaos Space Marine warband that claims a Hulk containing a Heresy-era battle barge might recover enough functioning bolters, power armor components, and heavy weapons to re-equip an entire company. The recovered equipment also carries historical significance. Weapons that served during the Siege of Terra or the Scouring possess value beyond their practical function, serving as relics that connect modern Traitor Marines to their Legion's glory days. The Iron Warriors approach Space Hulk conquest with characteristic methodical efficiency, their warpsmiths analyzing Hulk structures to identify the most defensible sections and optimal locations for establishing fortified positions. The Iron Warriors don't simply occupy Space Hulks, they rebuild them according to siege warfare principles, their modifications transforming random accumulations of vessels into coherent defensive networks. Warpsmiths direct enslaved cultists and demon engines in construction projects that create overlapping fields of fire, reinforced strongpoints, and kill zones designed to bleed attackers white before they reach critical areas. The Iron Warriors install additional weapons systems scavenged from derelict vessels, mounting them in positions where they can engage approaching boarding craft or Imperial Navy vessels that attempt to bombard the Hulk. These fortified hulks serve the Iron Warriors as mobile siege platforms, appearing in orbit above Imperial fortress worlds and bombarding defensive installations with recovered weapons batteries. The Hulk's massive size allows them to absorb tremendous damage while maintaining combat effectiveness, their redundant systems and thick armor plating providing resilience that purpose-built warships cannot match. Imperial Navy vessels engaging Iron Warriors-held Space Hulks find themselves in grinding attritional battles where the Hulk's superior mass and firepower eventually overwhelm conventional warships. The Iron Warriors accept the Hulk's poor maneuverability as acceptable trade-off for their defensive capabilities, using smaller escort vessels to screen the Hulks while they advance toward bombardment positions. The Alpha Legion's use of Space Hulks demonstrates their preference for misdirection and infiltration over direct confrontation. Alpha Legion operatives board Hulks not to claim them permanently, but to establish hidden bases within their structures, their presence remaining undetected while other factions war over the derelicts. These covert bases serve as staging points for Alpha Legion operations throughout entire sectors, their locations unknown to Imperial authorities who might track more obvious Chaos strongholds. The Alpha Legion modifies sections of the Hulks to appear abandoned or infested with Xenos, discouraging investigation, while their actual operational centers remain concealed behind false bulkheads and collapsed corridors that can be quickly cleared when needed. The Night Lords favor Space Hulks for their terror potential, viewing the corrupted derelicts as perfect environments for their preferred style of warfare. Night Lords' warbands establish lairs in the darkest sections of corrupted hulks, their territories marked by flayed corpses and the screams of captives undergoing torture. The Night Lords use these bases to launch raids against nearby systems, their attacks focused on creating maximum psychological impact rather than strategic objectives. They abduct civilians from raided worlds, bringing them back to the Hulk for extended torture sessions that the Night Lords broadcast on hijacked Vox frequencies. The screams and pleas serve as warnings to other worlds in the sector. The Night Lords' message clear: resistance brings only suffering and death. The Emperor's children seek Space Hulks that contain specific types of vessels, their search focused on finding ships that once served in the Third Legion before their fall to Slaanesh. These hulks hold particular value to the Emperor's children, as they potentially contain equipment and relics from the Legion's past when they pursued perfection in all endeavors. The Traitor Marines established shrines aboard these hulks, their worship of Slaanesh conducted in chambers where they once trained and prepared for battle during the Great Crusade. The Emperor's children modify recovered vessels to serve their current appetites, installing torture chambers and pleasure dens where they conduct rituals that would horrify their former selves. The noise of their excess echoes through the Hulk's corridors, music played at volumes that shatter unprotected eardrums, screams that blend agony and ecstasy into sounds human vocal cords should not produce. Chaos sorcerers find space hulks particularly valuable for their ritual purposes. The vessels warp corruption, creating environments where demonic summoning requires less effort and fewer sacrifices. A sorcerer operating from a corrupted space hulk can conduct rituals that would require days of preparation in real space, the thin barriers between dimensions allowing demons to manifest with minimal coercion. The Thousand Suns establish libraries aboard claimed hulks, their sorcerers collecting forbidden texts and artifacts recovered from the derelict's depths. These libraries serve as research centers where the Thousand Suns pursue their endless quest for knowledge, their studies focused on understanding the warp's nature and expanding their sorcerous capabilities. The threat of deliberately steered space hulks represents a strategic nightmare for Imperial defense planning. Chaos forces that claim hulks sometimes gain sufficient control over their movements to direct them towards specific targets, using sorcery and demon binding to override the random drift that normally governs hulk trajectories. A Chaos warband might spend years establishing control over a hulk's systems, their tech marines and dark mechanicum, allies working to restore enough functionality to provide basic maneuvering capability. Once achieved, this control allows the Chaos forces to weaponize the Hulk itself, steering it toward Imperial worlds where its impact would cause catastrophic damage. The Space Hulk Damnation's hammer demonstrated this threat during the 41st millennium when Wordbearer's forces claimed the massive derelict and spent decades establishing control over its trajectory. The Wordbearer's Dark Apostle conducted rituals that bound powerful demons to the Hulk's structure, their essence providing the psychic force necessary to influence the vessel's path through the warp. When the Hulk next translated to real space, it appeared in the Agrippina sector on direct course toward the Forge world of the same name. Imperial authorities detected the Hulk's approach with sufficient time to evacuate critical personnel and equipment, but the Forge world's industrial infrastructure could not be relocated. The Wordbearer's intention was clear. They planned to crash the Hulk into Agrippina, destroying one of the Imperium's most productive manufacturing centers. The Imperial Navy deployed a battle group to intercept Damnation's hammer, their orders including destruction of the Hulk before it could reach bombardment range of the Forge world. The engagement lasted for weeks, Imperial warships bombarding the Hulk with lance strikes and torpedo spreads, while Wordbearer's forces defended their prize with recovered weapons batteries and demonic manifestations. The Hulk's massive size allowed it to absorb tremendous punishment, its redundant structures maintaining integrity despite suffering damage that would have destroyed conventional warships. The Imperial Navy eventually concentrated fire on specific sections, targeting areas where their auspex detected power generation that might be driving the Hulk's movement. The sustained bombardment broke the Hulk apart, its fragments scattering across the system and eliminating the threat to Agrippina. The use of space hulks as corruption vectors extends beyond simple physical threat. Chaos forces deliberately steer corrupted hulks toward systems where their appearance will cause maximum psychological and spiritual damage to Imperial populations. A hulk appearing in orbit above a shrine world carries symbolic weight that undermines the faithful's confidence in the Emperor's protection. The ecclesiarchy must explain how such obvious corruption could penetrate so close to sacred ground, their theological arguments struggling against the visible evidence of chaos power. Some populations lose faith entirely when corrupted hulks appear, their belief systems unable to reconcile the presence of such manifest evil with their understanding of the Emperor's omnipotence. The Inquisition maintains specialized protocols for dealing with chaos-corrupted space hulks, their procedures recognizing that these vessels pose threats beyond simple military danger. Inquisitors who detect corrupted hulks immediately classify them as Hereticus-level threats requiring maximum response. The Ordo Malleus takes primary jurisdiction over these cases, their expertise in demonic matters essential for understanding the corruption's extent and determining appropriate countermeasures. Grey Knights receive deployment orders for operations against heavily corrupted hulks, their psychic wards and sanctified weapons providing protection against the demonic entities that infest these vessels. The purging of chaos-corrupted space hulks requires different tactics than operations against Genestealer infestations or orc populations. Standard weapons prove less effective against demons, their physical forms resistant to conventional munitions. Grey Knights employ force weapons and psycannons that channel psychic energy into attacks capable of disrupting demonic essence, their strikes banishing entities back to the warp rather than simply destroying physical bodies. The Grey Knights advance through corrupted sections, conducting continuous rituals and prayers, their faith in the Emperor providing protection against the spiritual corruption that pervades these areas. Their presence weakens the demons' hold on real space, creating zones where the creatures cannot fully manifest and must rely on possessed cultists or corrupted servitors to engage the Grey Knights physically. The discovery of Traitor Legion presence aboard space hulks triggers immediate escalation of Imperial response, as Chaos Space Marine warbands represent far more dangerous threats than indigenous Xenos populations. A single Chaos Space Marine possesses combat capabilities equivalent to an entire squad of Imperial Guard infantry, their millennia of experience and warp-granted enhancements making them formidable opponents even for loyalist Space Marines. The Inquisition coordinates with multiple Space Marine chapters when intelligence indicates significant Traitor Legion presence aboard a hulk, their force composition designed to achieve overwhelming superiority rather than attempting operations with minimal assets. The Black Templars particularly pursue opportunities to engage Traitor Legions aboard space hulks, their chapters' crusading nature driving them to seek out and destroy the Emperor's enemies wherever they hide. Black Templars strike forces board corrupted hulks with righteous fury, their assault squads using jump packs to rapidly close with Traitor Marine positions, while tactical squads provide supporting fire. The Black Templars accept heavy casualties in these operations, viewing the deaths of battle brothers as acceptable sacrifices if they result in Traitor Legion casualties. Their chaplains lead from the front, their Crozius Arcanum smashing through corrupted armor, while they recite litanies that strengthen their brothers' resolve and weaken the enemy's demonic allies. The recovery of chaos artifacts from space hulks creates additional complications for Imperial forces, as these items possess value to the Inquisition's research efforts while simultaneously posing corruption risks. Inquisitors must determine which artifacts warrant recovery for study versus those that should be destroyed immediately. Weapons bearing chaos runes might reveal information about Traitor Legion capabilities and weaknesses, making them valuable intelligence sources despite their tainted nature. Books and data cores containing heretical texts provide insight into chaos worship practices that help Inquisitors identify and combat cult activities across the Imperium. The Inquisition maintains secure facilities where these artifacts can be studied under controlled conditions, their researchers protected by multiple layers of psychic wards and physical security. The strategic mobility that space hulks provide to chaos forces complicates Imperial defense planning throughout multiple sectors. A Traitor Legion warband operating from a space hulk can strike at targets across vast distances, their base appearing and disappearing without predictable pattern. Imperial authorities cannot concentrate defenses against these threats because they lack intelligence about where the hulks will next manifest. The Chaos forces exploit this uncertainty, conducting raids that seem random but actually follow strategic plans designed to degrade Imperial capabilities across entire regions. A Death Guard warband might appear in 3 different systems within a single year, each raid targeting critical infrastructure or military installations before the Plague Hulk vanishes back into the warp. The Imperium's response to this strategic threat involves maintaining rapid reaction forces capable of deploying against Space Hulk appearances with minimal preparation time. Space Marine chapters position strike cruisers in patrol patterns that provide coverage across their recruiting sectors, their vessels ready to respond when Imperial authorities detect corrupted hulks entering real space. The Imperial Navy maintains similar rapid response elements, though their capital ships lack the Space Marine's specialized boarding capabilities. These naval forces focus on containing space hulks through bombardment and blockade, while Space Marine forces prepare for boarding operations, their combined efforts preventing Chaos forces from using the hulks as platforms for extended campaigns. The formation of the Great Rift in the closing years of the 41st millennium fundamentally altered the threat profile space hulks posed to the Imperium. The massive warp storm that split the galaxy in half created unprecedented instability in the fabric of real space, its energies churning the Imperium into a state of constant upheaval. Space hulks that had drifted through the warp for centuries suddenly found themselves expelled into real space with far greater frequency than historical patterns suggested possible. Imperial authorities documented a 300% increase in space hulk appearances during the first decade following the rift's formation, their sensors detecting derelicts materializing throughout both the Imperium Sanctus and the Imperium Nihilus with alarming regularity. The hulks emerging from the cicatrix maledictum itself carry corruption that exceeds anything previously encountered in Imperial records. These vessels spent unknown periods immersed in the rift's energies, their structures saturated with warp essence that transforms them into something beyond simple corrupted derelicts. The metal of their hulls demonstrates properties that defy material analysis, bulkheads that phase between solid and incorporeal states, corridors that extend through dimensions human perception cannot process, and chambers where the laws of physics operate according to principles that change moment to moment. Imperial forces boarding these hulks report environmental conditions that shift without warning, gravity reversing or multiplying randomly, atmospheres cycling through compositions ranging from standard oxygen-nitrogen mixtures to clouds of psychoactive gases that induce hallucinations in unprotected personnel. The indigenous threats inhabiting rift-emerged hulks demonstrate enhanced capabilities that suggest prolonged warp exposure has fundamentally altered their nature. Genestealer infestations aboard these vessels show mutations that standard tyrannid organisms do not possess, additional limbs that sprout from torsos in configurations that serve no apparent evolutionary purpose, carapaces that display iridescent coloration shifting through spectrums invisible to unaugmented human vision, and psychic capabilities that allow individual genestealers to project mental attacks capable of incapacitating space marines through their psycho-conditioning. The patriarchs commanding these mutated broods possess power that rivals sanctioned psychers, their mental reach extending across entire systems rather than being limited to planetary distances. Orc populations aboard Rift-emerged hulks display similar anomalies, their crude technology incorporating warp-touched materials that function through principles the Adeptus Mechanicus cannot explain. Mechboys working with these materials create weapons that fire projectiles phasing between real space and the immaterium, making them impossible to defend against through conventional armor. The orcs themselves show physical mutations, additional eyes that perceive across multiple spectrums, skin that hardens into chitinous plates resembling demonic armor, and vocal cords that produce sounds causing physical pain in those who hear them. These mutations don't diminish the orcs' combat effectiveness. Instead, they enhance already formidable physical capabilities while adding unpredictable elements that complicate tactical planning. The strategic nightmare these Rift-emerged hulks represent extends beyond their enhanced indigenous threats. Imperial authorities cannot predict what horrors might emerge when these derelicts transition to real space, their contents potentially including anything that exists within the warp's twisted domains. Demonic entities might establish permanent presence aboard these hulks, their manifestations sustained by the ambient warp energy saturating the vessel's structures. Chaos Space Marine warbands operating from the Dark Imperium use Rift-emerged hulks as invasion platforms, their forces appearing deep within Imperial-held territory without having to traverse the dangerous routes through the cicatrix maledictum that conventional fleet movements require. The Indomitus Crusade's progress through the galaxy brought Imperial forces into contact with unprecedented numbers of these corrupted hulks, their appearances occurring in systems that Primarch Robute Guilliman's fleet sought to liberate or reinforce. The Primarch recognized the threat these vessels posed to his strategic objectives, their unpredictable manifestations disrupting supply lines and tying down military assets that could otherwise support offensive operations. Guilliman issued directives prioritizing the detection and elimination of space hulks appearing in Crusade operational areas, his orders emphasizing that allowing these vessels to drift unchallenged risked seeding Genestealer cults or delivering chaos forces behind Imperial lines. The introduction of Primaris Space Marines into chapter rosters provided the Imperium with enhanced capabilities for addressing space hulk threats, though the new warriors required adaptation of existing tactical doctrine to account for their different equipment and capabilities. Primaris Marines equipped with Mark X power armor possess greater strength and resilience than their firstborn brothers, their enhanced physiology allowing them to operate effectively in environments that would challenge traditional Space Marines. The Mark X armor's modular design permits rapid reconfiguration for different combat scenarios, with Gravis pattern variants providing protection approaching Terminator plate levels while maintaining greater mobility than the ancient suits. Gravis armor development specifically targeted the requirements of boarding actions and close quarters combat in confined environments. The heavy plates covering the armor's chest, shoulders, and limbs provide protection against the rending claws and crushing strength that Genestealers employ, their reinforced construction preventing the catastrophic breaches that sometimes occur when standard power armor faces sustained melee assault. The armor's power plant generates sufficient energy to support heavy weapon systems while maintaining the servomotor output necessary for combat effectiveness in zero-gravity or variable gravity environments common aboard space hulks. Primaris Marines wearing Gravis armor can advance through hostile territory while carrying firepower equivalent to Terminator-equipped Devastator weapons, their storm bolters or plasma incinerators providing sustained fire that suppresses enemy positions. The Aggressor Squad configuration demonstrates how Primaris forces adapted traditional close support roles for Space Hulk operations. These squads wear Gravis armor equipped with multiple weapon systems, Boltstorm gauntlets that fire from integrated storm bolters, while the Marines' hands remain free for other tasks, and Flamestorm gauntlets that project burning promethium in wide arcs perfect for clearing rooms and corridors. The aggressors advance at the front of Primaris formations, their combined firepower creating walls of explosive rounds and flame that enemy forces cannot penetrate without suffering catastrophic casualties. The psychological impact of aggressor squads proves as valuable as their physical firepower. Enemies facing these advancing warriors often break and flee rather than standing against the overwhelming destruction the Primaris Marines deliver. Inceptor squads provide Primaris forces with rapid response capabilities that traditional Space Marine units lack, their jump packs allowing them to traverse Space Hulk interiors through routes that ground-bound forces cannot access. The Inceptors use their mobility to bypass enemy strong points, appearing behind defensive positions and attacking from unexpected angles. Their assault bolters deliver sustained fire while the squad remains airborne, the Inceptors circling enemy positions and maintaining constant pressure that prevents opponents from establishing effective defensive formations. The squads prove particularly effective against orc mobs, whose crude weapons struggle to track fast-moving aerial targets, while the Inceptors methodically eliminate the greenskins from positions where return fire cannot reach them. The integration of Primaris and Firstborn Marines in combined boarding operations created initial friction, as both groups adjusted to working alongside warriors trained in different tactical traditions. Firstborn Terminators possessed centuries of accumulated experience in Space Hulk operations, their knowledge earned through countless boarding actions against every threat the galaxy contains. The Primaris Marines brought enhanced physical capabilities and modern equipment, but lacked the institutional knowledge that guided veteran Terminator squads through the specific challenges Space Hulk environments present. Chapter Masters recognized that combining both forces' strengths required careful coordination rather than simply deploying them as separate elements. The Blood Angels developed integrated tactical doctrine that positioned Primaris aggressor squads alongside Terminator units, the combined formation providing overlapping capabilities that addressed each element's limitations. The Terminators advanced through primary corridors using their storm bolters and power fists to engage enemies in the confined spaces where their armor's protection proved most valuable. The aggressor squads operated in parallel routes, their Gravis armor allowing them to traverse sections where Terminator plates bulk would create movement difficulties. The two elements maintained Vox contact and coordinated their advances, each squad supporting the other when either encountered resistance beyond their immediate capability to overcome. This combined approach proved effective during Blood Angels operations aboard the Space Hulk Vengeful Spirit, where the chapter's forces purged a massive Genestealer infestation that had established itself throughout the derelict's multiple decks. The Ultramarines took different approaches to Primaris integration, their adherence to Codex doctrine leading them to establish specialized Primaris companies trained specifically for boarding operations. These companies trained extensively in mock-ups of Space Hulk environments, their exercises incorporating the lessons learned from millennia of Firstborn operations, while developing new tactics that exploited Primaris capabilities. The Ultramarines equipped these specialized companies with full Gravis armor complements and heavy weapons configurations optimized for the sustained firefights typical of Space Hulk combat. When Space Hulks appeared in Ultramar or surrounding systems, these Primaris companies deployed as primary response forces, their operations demonstrating effectiveness that matched veteran Terminator performance while suffering lower casualty rates due to their enhanced resilience and firepower. The strategic concerns regarding increased Space Hulk density extend beyond immediate military threats to encompass broader implications for galactic navigation and commerce. The Imperium's trade networks depend on established warp routes connecting Forge worlds, Agri worlds, and Hive worlds in supply chains that sustain entire sectors. Space Hulks appearing along these routes create navigational hazards that force merchant vessels to alter their courses, adding weeks or months to journey times and disrupting the careful logistics that keep Imperial worlds functioning. A Space Hulk materializing in a major shipping lane might force the closure of that route until Imperial Navy forces can destroy or relocate the derelict, during which time the systems depending on that route's traffic face supply shortages that cascade into economic disruption and potential unrest. The Navis Nobilite reports increasing difficulty maintaining accurate charts of safe warp routes, their navigators detecting spatial distortions and current shifts that suggest the Great Rift's formation permanently altered the Imperium's geography. Space Hulks contribute to this instability, their transitions between warp and real space creating eddies and turbulence that affect nearby warp currents. Navigators piloting vessels through regions where Space Hulks frequently appear must exercise extreme caution, their calculations accounting for potential disruptions that could throw their ships off course or deposit them in real space far from their intended destinations. The additional time and effort these precautions require further degrades the Imperium's ability to maintain efficient interstellar commerce and military deployment. The Adeptus Mechanicus calculates that current Space Hulk appearance rates, if sustained, will result in a 15% reduction in galactic trade efficiency within a century. This projection assumes no further increase in Hulk manifestations and accounts only for navigational disruption rather than the military resources diverted to addressing Hulk-related threats. The actual economic impact likely exceeds these estimates, as the calculations cannot account for cascading effects when critical supply chains experience disruption. A Forge world that receives raw materials shipments 3 months late might miss production quotas that affect Imperial Guard equipment availability across multiple sectors, creating shortages that impact military operations in ways that extend far beyond the initial trade disruption. The strategic response to increased Space Hulk density requires resources the Imperium struggles to allocate given the multitude of threats it faces following the Great Rift's formation. Demon incursions from the Cicatrix Maledictum demand immediate military response, their potential to corrupt entire worlds justifying the deployment of substantial Space Marine and Imperial Guard forces. Tyranid hive fleets continue their advance into Imperial space from multiple vectors, their bioships consuming world after world, while Imperial forces fight desperate defensive actions. Orc wars erupt across the galaxy with increased frequency, the Greenskins apparently energized by the galaxy-wide conflict and launching invasions that require significant military commitment to repel. Against these immediate existential threats, space hulks represent lower priority concerns despite their potential for long-term strategic damage. The Inquisition advocates for increased resource allocation to space hulk interdiction, their analysis suggesting that preventing Genestealer cult seeding and chaos infiltration through Hulk-delivered threats provides better return on investment than many conventional military deployments. An inquisitorial task force that destroys a space Hulk before it can seed Genestealer cults on multiple worlds prevents the future resource expenditure necessary to purge those infections once they establish themselves. The Ordo Xenos particularly emphasizes this preventive approach, their experience with cult uprisings demonstrating that early intervention costs far less than delayed response after cults achieve deep infiltration into planetary populations and government structures. The political reality of Imperial resource allocation often prevents optimal strategic responses, as sector governors and planetary authorities prioritize immediate local threats over potential future problems that space hulks represent. A governor facing orc raids or chaos cult activity within his territory will demand military support for addressing those immediate threats rather than allocating forces to destroy space hulks drifting through his sector's outer systems. The Administratum's bureaucratic processes further complicate efficient response, as requests for military assets to address space hulk threats must navigate approval chains that can take months or years, while the derelicts continue drifting toward populated systems. The long-term implications of sustained high space hulk appearance rates include potential isolation of entire sectors if navigational disruption reaches critical levels. The Imperium Nihilus already faces severe isolation due to the Cicatrix Maledictum's interference with warp travel, its worlds cut off from Terra and forced to operate with minimal support from the broader Imperium. Additional space hulk density in regions already suffering navigation difficulties could render some systems completely inaccessible, their populations left to face whatever threats emerge without any possibility of Imperial reinforcement. These isolated worlds would inevitably fall to Xenos predation, chaos corruption, or simple resource exhaustion as their industries fail without external trade to sustain them. The Imperium's survival depends on maintaining the infrastructure that allows coordination across thousands of light years, and space hulks represent a threat to that fundamental requirement. Each derelict that appears in a critical shipping lane or near a major hub world creates disruption that cascades through connected systems. The cumulative effect of hundreds or thousands of such disruptions occurring simultaneously across the galaxy threatens to fragment the Imperium into isolated regions that cannot support each other or coordinate responses to major threats. The Tyranid hive fleets would find such fragmentation advantageous, as it would allow them to consume isolated systems without facing coordinated Imperial resistance. The technological solutions the Mechanicus pursues to address space hulk threats focus on improved detection and rapid response capabilities rather than preventing hulk formation itself. Enhanced Auspex systems capable of detecting space hulk transitions from the warp at greater distances would provide additional warning time, allowing Imperial forces to intercept derelicts before they drift into populated regions. The Mechanicus dedicates research efforts to developing these improved sensors, though progress remains slow due to the fundamental difficulties of detecting objects transitioning between dimensions. The most promising approaches involve psychic detection methods that sense the warp disturbances accompanying hulk manifestations, but these systems require trained psychers to operate and face the usual risks associated with any technology dependent on psychic capability. The development of specialized hulk breaker vessels represents another technological approach. These ships designed specifically for rapidly destroying space hulks through concentrated firepower. The Imperial Navy commissioned several prototype designs during the Indomitus Crusade, their weapons configurations emphasizing sustained bombardment capability and armor penetration sufficient to break through the massive structural redundancy that allows space hulks to survive conventional naval weapons. The prototypes demonstrated effectiveness during trials, their Lance batteries and Nova cannons reducing test hulks to debris fields within hours rather than the days or weeks conventional bombardment requires. Production of these specialized vessels proceeds slowly, as Forge Worlds prioritize manufacturing standard warship patterns that address more immediate military requirements. The future of Imperial space hulk response depends on factors beyond military capability or technological development. The Great Rift's eventual behavior, whether it remains stable, expands further, or somehow contracts, will determine whether space hulk appearance rates continue at current elevated levels or return to historical norms. The Tyranid hive fleets continued advance, and their use of space hulk delivered Genestealer cults as navigation beacons creates feedback loops where increased hulk density attracts more Tyranid attention, which in turn leads to more cult seeding and additional beacon transmissions. Breaking this cycle requires addressing both the space hulk problem and the broader Tyranid threat simultaneously, a coordination challenge that strains Imperial strategic planning capabilities. The Imperium faces an uncertain future, where space hulks represent one threat among countless others, their danger perhaps less immediate than demon incursions or Tyranid invasions, but no less real in their potential to undermine Imperial cohesion and capability. The ancient derelicts drifting through the void carry with them the accumulated horrors of 10,000 years of warfare and corruption, each one a potential catastrophe waiting to unfold when it materializes near an unprepared world. The Imperium's response to this threat will help determine whether humanity can maintain the unity and infrastructure necessary for survival in a galaxy that grows more hostile with each passing year, or whether the fragments of mankind's ancient vessels will contribute to the fragmentation of mankind's current empire. The space marines who board these hulks, the naval crews who destroy them, and the inquisitors who coordinate responses all understand that their work prevents disasters that most Imperial citizens will never know threaten them, their vigilance standing between humanity and the darkness that space hulks carry through the void.